Today's story takes place in India, and it's a heartbreaking story about a mother who loses her daughter, and it's all because of her evil mother-in-law, who does not allow her to take the daughter to the hospital. And yes, money was an issue here, and also a power play came into it. A little bit of a warning, this story is pretty sad, but guys, let's get into it.
I've heard and read from infinite places that there's no bigger loss than the loss of your child. I never understood what kind of loss. Mental, emotional maybe. But don't people get over every loss of life, eventually? No, they don't. When parents lose their child, they never get over it. They lose everything along with the ability to live, and I lost my sister 11 years ago, and my parents lost their first child. You would think my parents still had me. True, that's true. But I lost my parents along with my sister too, at least emotionally. It's been 11 long years since my parents survived. One sad day at a time. I turned 18 a few months back, and while I started my first year of college, I came across support groups and online communities which help you by sharing your stories. So here I am telling my parents' life story, especially my mother's. My name is Artie, and I belong to a typical narrow-minded Indian family. Our culture has its perks along with some age-old cons, which sometimes demand people's mental peace. And mental peace is very minimal price for Indians to pay. I was merely an 8-year-old child when my life turned upside down because of my dad. Well, my parents suffered a lot. Today I'm going to tell you the story. After a lot of convincing, my mother has agreed to narrate her struggle journey in her words as a first step towards healing, and like most Indian mothers, she's not internet friendly, so I'm going to be her writer for the story, with the highest hopes that she'll get some words of wisdom of how brave they have been through it all, and a sliver of hope that they can finally move on as karma has been served. My name's Devi. I married Atul when I was 20 years of age. Yes, it was an arranged marriage. My parents always wanted me to marry Atul. When my parents moved to Mumbai, Atul's parents were my neighbors. They had a beautiful big house and even a car back in the 70s when cars were known to be luxury. The extravagant lifestyle impressed my mother, and my father was a salesman and earned a decent living, but it was nothing compared to my father-in-law. He was a high-ranking government official, and I and Atul grew up playing together and finally got married when I was 20, even though we knew each other and liked each other a lot. It was an arranged marriage when my parents asked his parents for the marriage. Atul's mother was not very sure, but agreed after my father-in-law liked me and my parents. I still remember my wedding day, and my mother was on cloud 9, thinking I was going to be Bahu of such a reputed and well-off family. Both I and Atul are single children to our parents. I was a fresh graduate when I got married, and Atul had just joined a bank as a clerk after completing his graduation. Controversial to all the other arranged marriages back in time, mine and Atul's were perfect. We loved each other, and the odds just benefited us. He was doing well in his career with growth in his way, and I was flourishing too as a housewife. My mother-in-law slowly and gradually accepted me and now considered me to be a part of the family. We lived together in the same house, and I admired as a child. All 4 of us were a sweet family, but the best perk about my life was my father-in-law. He was a very supportive guardian. He never once made me feel like I'm his Bahu and always treated me like a daughter. 1 year after getting married, I was pregnant, and all of us were extremely happy by the news. That was a golden period of my life, when everyone important to me came together to feel the joy and, well, took care of my emotions and needs. I felt like the queen of my tiny kingdom. After I had my baby shower, I shifted to my parents' house and was supposed to stay there until my child was 4 months old. Rituals like these make me fall in love with our culture. My pregnancy and delivery both were smoother than I expected. 9 months later, I had my beautiful Asha. Atul and I already had names for both genders, and we, had our daughter. We named her Asha, which means hope. All my life, I was extremely fulfilled. I had small dreams and always found reason to be happy. I never wanted much out of life until Asha came along. Asha made me a mother and, well, who wanted everything for her daughter? All the luck, wealth, and love available in the world. I wanted it all for her. My parents were super happy, but my mother-in-law did not express much. Atul and I got to talking one day, and we just believed she might still be overwhelmed by her first grandchild. As I was with my mother after giving birth, Atul used to come to my place every day after work. My mother-in-law never did expect for the day I got discharged from the hospital. Postpartum is hard, and my emotions were all over the place, but I survived with love and help from everyone. My mother advised me not to read too much into my mother-in-law's behavior and enjoy my time, as Asha might grow up fast. And I did exactly that until the day came when I had to go back to my home. My in-law had to perform a small puja, and a ritual for the baby coming home was discussed before my delivery. But when I reached home, I realized nothing of the sort was happening. I instantly asked Atul what was going on, and he had to give up pretending and told me the most shocking truth for my ears. My mother-in-law was not happy with a girl child. I had never experienced this firsthand. Yes, we read stories in India and hear in the news and television that people do not like girl children, and usually the hatred reflects on the daughter-in-law. But I always believed that these stories were from my childhood and that the world had advanced in the last 20 years. Additionally, it was difficult for me to accept this side of my mother-in-law, because after the initial stages of our marriage, she has shown nothing but love to me. In some instances, her overly possessive nature towards Atul made it difficult. But that's a cup of tea for any Indian bahu. Except that there was never an issue, and nor did we discuss the gender of our baby after I was pregnant. I brushed off the worries and behaved normally at home, without complaining about her behavior, hoping she'll fall in love with the baby the same way we all are. Asha was the sweetest child. No fuss, no drama, just a happy child exactly like me. Atul used to tell me that she is my reflection, always with a smile on her face and no complaints. What we all expected did not happen, and my mother-in-law never liked Asha much. She did all the things a grandmother is expected to do. She loved her in public too, but it was the four walls of our home that reeked of unacceptance. After a while, we got used to it, and Asha turned 3. Once again, I got pregnant and was expecting our second child. This time around, the news did not create the wave of magic like it did the last time. My mother-in-law instantly asked for us to get the gender checked. I was scared, Atul was scared, and we feared the worst. I did not agree to take the test, but my decision ruined my house. Every day we had the same fight over and over until one day I gave up and asked Atul to take the test. On the way to the hospital, I was scared to even move. Asha was sitting in my lap in the car and innocently asked me, "Is Daddy angry at our baby?" I immediately began to cry, and so did Atul. I know everybody wonders why we did not leave our in-laws and live separately. Well, for one, that is not our culture, and 2, Atul did not have any siblings, and we knew they needed us more than they needed them. And we're just those people who cannot leave our parents if we want to live peacefully in society. We reached the hospital after what felt like the longest ride of my life. Gender reveal by then was an illegal act, so my father-in-law had arranged the gender exam through one of his friends. It's a girl. Update number 1. My mother started crying after she said the last sentence of her story. She was uncrossable. All the memories came crashing down on her, and I was so hurt by just looking at her feeling absolutely hopeless. So the last update on her life story was the revelation that she was pregnant again with a girl. We took a 2-day break before continuing the story as she needed time to process it. When the doctors excitedly revealed, "Congratulations, it's a girl," and a weird wave of anxiety shot down from my toe to my spine. I didn't know how to react at all. My heart was jumping up and down with joy, and my eyes were tearing up with emotion, and my head was denying any possibility of this happening again. I looked at Atul, and he held my hand so tightly that we did not need to say any words to each other. That hold transferred all the thoughts, and even he started to cry. We went home, and we don't have to say a word because my father-in-law had already asked for the report. They were just there to welcome us with cold stares and tension like we had been robbed. Well, according to my mother-in-law, we had been robbed of having a chance of an heir. The most hurtful communication happened, and the worst was said that night. We were asked to get the baby, well, get rid of it. My heart sank deep down in this emotional pool, which I did not even know existed. My heart sank deep down, and before I could muster up the courage to say anything, Atul raised his voice in anger at his mother and said, "This will never happen." To my shock, my father-in-law joined him and agreed. Yes, everybody had their own choices, but more often, my mother-in-law's last words were the final decision on any matter, and never once did anybody raise their voice to her. So this was naturally very astonishing for me and her. Atul looked at me with pure love and asked, "Do you mind another girl?" I smiled from tooth to tooth and said, "I can't wait to have one more Asha." We laughed and went to our rooms that night. The next morning when we woke up, our lives were changed forever. My mother-in-law stopped talking to us completely, and even Asha suffered. She did not understand at the age of 3 why her daddy was not taking her to the park anymore, or why she was keeping her away. Seeing Asha craving her grandmother's love made me hate her for the first time. What is it her fault for? She's just 3. Unlike my last pregnancy, which was flowers and rainbows, my pregnancy hardship was every day. I was not feeling that well physically, and mentally it was a war zone in my house. However, the suffering was just 7 months because this time I asked Atul to go to my mother for delivery. And he agreed because he knew how miserable I was here. My parents, on the other hand, were the happiest for my second baby, and when I left the house at 7 months old, my father-in-law visited me every week, and that gave me some survival strength for my future ahead. But even he was given the silent treatment for taking our side and denying the possibility of getting rid of the baby. Sometimes I wonder, how can she hate the idea of her grandchildren being female? She's a female, for goodness sake. And for boys to be born, we will need girls to be born. Our relationship changed drastically over the period of 9 months. As I grew, her hatred for our decision was growing alongside, and I delivered Artie, my beaming, beautiful baby girl. I asked the nurse to hand over the child to Asha first, and she jumped with joy, and Atul picked her up and placed her on the sofa. With her tiny little hands, she asked the nurse to give baby Artie in her lap. Well, when the nurse handed over the baby, Asha was looking at her with so much pride and protectiveness. That moment is still fresh in my memory, and it made me forget all the pain anybody had made me feel about having a baby girl. 3 months passed in a heartbeat. I love both my girls and cannot imagine having a boy instead of Artie. More than me, Asha is thrilled to have a baby sister and is completely in love with her. Asha is 4 years old and goes to play school in the morning. So our routine now is this. When Asha wakes up in the morning, she runs straight towards Artie and plays with her until she has to go to the play school. Once she's back, she spends all day taking care of her sister, and sometimes I don't even feel like I'm a mother of a 5-month-old child, because I've had so much help, and sometimes Asha handles, well, Artie better than I can. Life was going good. Atul got promoted as a branch manager, and after 5 years of hard work, we were doing well as a family. My mother-in-law was not happy, and we did not expect much from her. On the other hand, my father-in-law became a doting grandfather. He spends almost all evening playing with the girls and taking them to the park. Artie did not know grandmother's love yet, but Asha did, and she sure used to miss her a lot. Sometimes she would even talk to her and tell her how much she misses going to the park with her, but all her efforts were in vain. My mother-in-law's love had turned into hatred, deep hatred for these beautiful girls. Whenever she saw them, it just reminded her of the 2 times she missed having a boy. Life went by with hatred burning in the home, and I asked Atul so many times that we just move out. But every time we came close to making the decision, either my father-in-law stopped us or the fear of society got into our heads. The next 6 to 7 years went by very fast. Asha and Artie have turned 8 and 11, when the most crucial life decision was about to be made. I got a call from the girls' school one morning, and the teacher asked if we could all come down to the school because Asha was burning up and needed to go home. So we rushed to the school, and I've never seen Asha so weak and pale. From school, we headed to the hospital, only to find out that Asha has a very high fever and the doctors need to run some blood tests and find out the cause. A few hours later, the blood reports came back, and Asha had dengue. Her platelet count dropped to 20,000. Update number 2. Asha was getting weaker by the day. When the reports came in, I asked Atul to admit Asha into the hospital, but all of them thought that it was just fever and can be treated at home. I knew my baby. It was not just fever. She was being eaten from inside. Her skin was getting whiter by the hour, and it felt like her intestines would collapse any time after constantly puking every 20 minutes. For the last 3 days, we've been treating Asha at home with the medications that the doctor recommended. My mother-in-law kept saying how Asha was being dramatic because she did not want to go to school. She refused for us to go to the hospital because she believed doctors just exaggerate small fevers to extract money from people like us. On the 4th day, I asked for help from my father-in-law, and to my shock, he said the exact same thing: I need to calm down, as this was just fever and nothing else. I knew nobody believed that Asha was faking her health, but fear of my mother-in-law was larger than my child's health. In the evening, when Atul came, I asked him firmly to help me take Asha to the hospital, or I will go by myself. Seeing my resistance, Atul agreed, and we went against my mother-in-law's will. When we were leaving, she kept shouting, "If you go to the hospital for such small things and waste away your money, don't come back to this home. You better find a place for yourself. You people are fools and blinded by your daughter." The screams became distant as we left. When we reached the hospital, the doctor looked at us like we were ghosts, in utter disbelief that we were standing in front of him. He started asking how long has she been sick like this, and when was the last day that we got her reports done. Asha, on the other hand, was puking her lungs out and burning up. The next half an hour felt like a slow-motion movie, where people are running from one ward to the other, getting everything done on Asha, and panic took over the entire staff. Up till the moment where the movie stopped. Everyone stopped. There was nothing but silence. Asha was gone. Our hope was gone. She's dead. I did not move for the next hour, and they took Asha away from the ward, but I'm still sitting on the waiting sofa in the same room. Atul's right beside me, equally in shock. We weren't crying. We weren't moving. We just sat there in disbelief at the situation. How can my child be gone in a mere hour? Gone forever? As the hospital staff knew my father-in-law, they informed him, and all our parents were here soon. My mother was hysterically crying, and I kept looking at her all dead. Emotions are a tricky business, you know. They don't come when you need them. I needed them at that moment. I wanted to cry. Wanted to just feel something, anything, to realize that my baby was gone. But all I felt was numbness and denial. It did not feel like anything was wrong. All the drama surrounded me, and we went back home. Atul started crying when we had to take Asha's body home for the rituals, and relatives were being informed that arrangements for a funeral were about to be made. I stood there at the corner of our house. Asha's body was lying there in the middle of our drawing room, and people started to walk in. Atul came to me and asked if I wanted to maybe change my clothes to something more funeral appropriate, and pointed towards my room. When I went to the room, I locked myself in and saw Artie sitting in the corner. She came up and hugged me tight, and I started bawling my eyes out. There's those emotions. It seemed like Artie's hug separated every piece of my body, and I felt pain. Pain I knew will never heal, and I was broken. My baby girl, my poor Asha, was gone. I looked at Artie, and I knew we would never be okay. Hey, this is Artie again. It's my turn to talk. Mom left the room after this part of the story, and she said she needs some space to absorb everything, and I understand. I don't remember much of Asha's childhood, and all were happy memories mostly, but now that I'm writing this, so many things are coming back to me. How Dottie used to hate me, and I never expected anything else because I was born with that hatred, but Asha had seen better, and it felt like she used to miss Dottie, loving her all her moments. The day when Asha left us is one of the most prominent parts of my childhood memories. That day we cremated hope of happiness from my family, and after that day everything changed. I'll keep you updated soon once my mom is okay to talk about this. Updates. Number 3. Sorry I've been missing for a month, but it's really hard to process grief, especially a grief that's consumed my whole family and changed our lives forever. My mother asked me to not write that story as she narrates to me and instead listen to all the things carefully and then put words on paper. So, this story is going to be from my narration. It was 12 days after we had the cremation ceremony for Asha, and all relatives were vanishing like dead flowers in the garden, one at a time. And soon we were all alone in the house. Now the 3 of us with Dottie and Dada. My mother had been awfully quiet for most of the days until someone asked her something about Asha and she would cry and leave the room. It breaks my heart to see my parents so helpless. The last of the relatives went home that evening. The evening that changed my family dynamics and declared us criminals. In the evening, my mother and I were in our room when my father came to take a shower. As long as my father was in the bathroom, my mother was pacing back and forth near the bathroom door. I could feel something restless brewing in the room, and what my mother said next to my father absolutely shocked me. You know, right, that you and your mother are responsible for my child's death. My father froze there at the bathroom door and could not move. As soon as he realized the magnitude of her words, he started sobbing and saying sorry, like he was on repeat, like a parrot. I did not understand what was happening, but I had never seen my father so weak and inconsolable. My mother did not react to my father's tears. Instead, she grew stronger with each tear that dropped and demanded justice. She was headstrong and warned to walk out with me if he did nothing about what happened to Asha. The next day, my father and mother were locked in the room for most of the morning and then went out into the city, asking me not to tell anything to grandparents about yesterday's communication. I nodded, because for the most part I did not even know what was happening. They returned late in the evening, but not alone. My maternal grandparents were with them, and a guy, in his mid-40s, who was a stranger to me. Something had changed in my parents' mannerisms that were not just helplessly hurting people anymore. They were onto something. All the adults sat in the room, and the stranger was an advocate. My parents had filed a complaint about my mother-in-law. They claimed Asha died because of her torture and negligence regarding her health, to which the lawyer replied that it's an act of attempt to murder. As we heard the word murder, the room went silent. My mother was crying in her eyes. Tears flowed down her cheeks, but there was no sound. Dadu got up and asked the lawyer to leave and looked at my parents with such angst and anger mixed. The lawyer stood up and left the notice on the table and asked my parents to call him after they had the discussion. Dadu was so angry at my parents for pulling such a drastic step and started rationally explaining what happened to Asha. For my mother, everything was falling onto deaf ears, and she kept nodding in silence and did not even look up once. My maternal grandfather stopped my dad and told him to face reality, to see that Asha was long gone because of my Dottie's hatred for the girls. Well, my Dottie was awfully quiet until my father spoke up and said, I can't believe how my mother did this to my child. I wish I could have done something and listened to Debbie. I could have saved my child if I wasn't afraid of society. Enough is enough." After my father said this, my daddy asked my parents to leave the house and never come back. They obliged. That night we went to my maternal house and all 4 adults were sitting right there and sitting when I woke up. They were awake the whole night, rationally calculating their next move. The news of my parents doing a case on my grandmother spread like wildfire in no time. My parents were prepared for all the backlash they were about to face, but did not care at all. My mother always cried, saying, "It's too late. We should have done something when Asha was around." No matter how much prepared my parents were, my grandparents were much more powerful and financially capable of tackling this. And, well, in India, money is much bigger proof than truth. The following week, my father lost his job without an explanation in the world, and for my maternal grandparents, it was getting difficult by the day to step out of the home. I remember I was bullied in school, saying my parents were opportunities and wanted to extract money from my grandparents by simply blackmailing them. My parents fought for the next 2 long years, going to court, surviving through their savings because nobody in town was ready to give my father a job and school was getting so hard for me. But the fight for my parents was much more important than their present. There were so many times when the lawyer my parents hired would get threats to not do this to my parents. I was 10 by then, and I could see my parents struggle because of my grandparents, and my hatred for them had absolutely reached its peak. There were not any exceptions for my daddy, but this time around my dada was helping her. He came by the house once or twice during the 2 years of legal wars with soft blackmail and little concern. He explained how my father is an only child and they're on the verge of death. He should not channel his grief into revenge and settle into the home. Plus, he would always mention how my parents should think about me and not take such drastic steps if they wanted to be a part of this society. All their attempts failed and my parents did not withdraw the case. My parents seek help from all the influential society members who were not connected to my dada, and some of them sympathize with my parents, but never lent a helping hand at all. Once a social worker finally agreed to help my mother, and that's when our case got a lot of local media coverage. It was almost 3 years, but justice was served. The hospital staff and a few of my good-hearted relatives and even the doctor testified in our favor, and my grandmother was given punishment. 15 years. Inside of a jail cell. Attempted murder. The day was the last when we saw her, and my grandfather lived alone in their big home, and we moved to the city. My father found a job in Pune, and we rented a small house in the city. During COVID, we got news in the year 2021 that my grandmother passed away because of complications with the virus. Alone, in a hospital bed, with nobody by her side. And because of the pandemic, nobody could see her in her final days. They cremated her by the government official, and she never came back to the house. She spent so much time hating us girls, and I miss my sister every day. We pray for her together every night before bed, and we've created this small and simple life here in the new city, and my mother feels comfort in knowing karma served a grandmother what she deserved. She left without feeling the warmth of her loved one in a cold hospital bed. Our lives changed the day Asha left, and it'll never be the same again. But our love for her will always give us strength.
Okay, so let's go ahead and discuss this. The comment section was absolutely ripping Dottie apart, OP's mother-in-law. So I just want to know, from your perspective, what would you have done? I mean, this was a heartbreaking story, and if you're in OP's position, apparently going against the mother-in-law and Indian culture is a huge no-no. Well, it turned out that a baby was lost because of this. So I really want to know what you guys would have done, having found out later on that, unfortunately, your daughter passed away. So drop your comments down below, guys. Let me know exactly what you thought about this story. If you guys are new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I release a story every single day. And don't worry, not all the stories are sad and emotional. Some are drama-filled. Some include mother-in-law dramas, wedding dramas. You name it, we cover it. So, if you weren't really a fan of the sad type of story, don't worry, we cover a lot. Mother-in-law of the week, nightmare story. Guys, my mother-in-law. She goes behind my back to have a DNA test done on my little babies. And why does she do that? Well, long story short, she hates my guts. Well, I'll do a little spoiler for you guys because it's one of many things that go crazy in this story. She faked the paternity test just to make it look like I was not, well, being responsible and I was sleeping with other men. Well, let me tell you this, I figured it out because she slipped up on one very small detail, and after she embarrassed me in front of the entire family, showing everyone the results, I decide to get my revenge on this nightmare mother-in-law of the week.
My mother-in-law hates me because I'm successful now. She's obsessed with the notion that I cheated. I've always been an independent woman, a good wife, and a good daughter. When I'm at work, I'm a hardworking supervisor who always makes sure that the job gets done. When I'm at home, I'm a devoted wife and a mother of 3 beautiful children. My husband and I make sure our kids are always well looked after and get a well-rounded childhood. While I'm a workaholic, being with my husband has brought some balance to my lifestyle, and before I met him, I was a career woman whose only goal was to make as much money as possible and secure a good position in society. While that is still important to me, family life is also very important to me. My children, Anaya, Chris, and Pedro, are the center of my attention. My husband is a gift from God. He does more of, well, everything. He does most of the child rearing while I sort out the bills and stuff. It was the deal that we made since his job does not require that many hours and I get paid more. People who know about our dynamic were a bit surprised since our roles are typically reversed, but I can assure you that we're happy. I'm happy to relieve him of taking care of the kids whenever he needs rest, and we're happy and have been for years. Well, that was until my mother-in-law moved in. Margaret is my mother-in-law as the reason I want to leave Monterey. She always has something to say about me, and she compares me to herself and other wives in the family. She was a stay-at-home mom until her husband passed. Well, good for her. I respect that. My husband, Michael, turned out just fine, did he not? But she says that I should take a more hands-on approach with my kids, and she feels that I need to cook, clean, take care of the kids, and let my husband work. She has said it many times, but I change the topic when she starts. It's no secret that she hates me. Everyone in the family knows that, and knows better than to get in her way. She has a problem with everything that I do and treats me like I am incompetent. When we have family functions, she does not allow me to help out because she says, and I quote, "I'm sure the work is beneath you," much to the delight of the aunts and cousins in the family. And I can say that seeing her once or twice a year is more than enough to fill my quota for pain. She's a widow. Her husband passed away more than 20 years ago, and she worked as a preschool teacher to support her kids, and eventually ended up as a teacher. But she retired last year. A few months after that, she told my husband that she did not want to live alone anymore because the house was empty. So we agreed for the kids to spend the holiday with her. Anaya was already begging me to come and fetch them before the end of the week. She was very strict with the kids and did not allow them to have any fun. In addition, she did not help them with their holiday homework, even though I sent her instructions to do so. She believed that I was overloading them with information. Instead, she spent her day making them run her errands, clean out her attic, and work in her garden. In addition, she fed them very unhealthy food, even food that they were allergic to. The last straw was when she gave Chris, who is lactose intolerant, some milk. Anaya called me, panicking, and told me that I needed to come and fetch them now. So I went to take my kids, and I had a very stern word with the grandmother about not listening to my instructions. She told me that I knew nothing. She is a former teacher, and by the way, she's raised 4 children to be healthy adults. A couple weeks after that, my husband told me that he was going to have to pick up more shifts at work, and that there was a chance of promotion. So, I offered to create a schedule so that I could do more at home and he could get more free time. We tried that for a week, but I reached the point of a burnout. So then he called his mom and asked her to stay with us, and she's been staying with us ever since. I can never do anything right in her eyes, and every day I fight with myself so that I do not tell her everything that's on my mind. When I do something, she undoes it and does it her way. She does not seem to understand that this is my house, my family, and my marriage, so she has no say here. The latest thing this week is the YouTube video she watched. Oh boy. The kids made the mistake of introducing her to YouTube, and she's been hooked on it. She loves watching videos and spends all day on it, which is actually good because that means she has no time to feud with me. But for the past few days, she has not shut up about a video that she watched. One day, when I was at work, she sent me a link to a YouTube video. I could barely watch it. It was so overly dramatic, and the topic bored me. It was about how a grandmother suspected that her son's kids were not his. So, she conducted a secret DNA test, and that DNA test proved that her daughter-in-law had been promiscuous, and that none of the kids were actually his. The moral of the story is that a mother knows best. She thought that it was very interesting and could simply not shut up about it for days. She said that it was about these days women were starting to be more promiscuous than men, and she thought it was more of a common thing than we actually thought. I told her that the video was just a reenactment, but she told me that there was no way. Trust me, it was real. She's not so versed in technology, pop culture, etc. She's the kind of person who gets fished and scammed. Thank goodness for the quick thinking of myself and my husband. We've configured her phone to have some of the best security, and we have also told her how she can get scammed and asked her to tell us when something is very suspicious. I thought that the issue of the video would die down a bit, but oh no, it did not. A friend of hers, came to visit and they discussed the video, and yes, I was home early, right? But I got some work done. My office is downstairs, close to the living room. I work with music most of the time because the walls are so thin that I can hear everything. I realized that my headphones were simply not charged. So, I charged them and worked in silence for a bit, and I even heard their conversation while I was working. But part of it did pique my interest. It was when Margaret told her that the video had confirmed some suspicion she had about me. Well, I stopped working as soon as she said that because, excuse me, what was she talking about? She said that she has always felt that I dressed way too provocatively. I was always working and I did not look like a wife. And I'll quote you their conversation. My son gives her way too much freedom, and she's too friendly with other men. Sometimes I don't know if the kids are my sons. Oh, you don't say. What will you do? Oh, well, maybe I should ask them to have a DNA test just to confirm. I mean, my son is going to get a promotion soon. I don't want him to take care of kids that aren't his. I got up, opened the door, and shouted, "How dare you?" Chloe? Oh, honey, I thought you were at work. Anna, let me walk you out. She turned a bit red from embarrassment, and I went back into the office and had not come out since. When my husband comes home, I'm going to tell him what she said. She was so disrespectful after we welcomed her into my home, and she has no respect, and I want her to leave immediately. Ugh, imagine. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I'm telling you guys right now, if you think this mother-in-law has done too much, You have seen nothing yet. Just wait until we get into update number 2. Oh boy. If you guys are new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I do stories every single day. We're about to hit 100,000 subscribers. So guys, if you want daily videos, the best way is to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Let's jump into the update, which is titled, I told my husband and he told her to back off. As you could tell, I was so mad when she accused me of cheating, and over the days that she's been obsessing over this video, I've noticed that she's looked at me in a funny way. She's like a dog with a bone, unable to let go of her suspicion that I cheated. She's looking for any way she can to find just to get me kicked out and ruin my marriage. I will not let her. I know she hates how outspoken I am, and that I don't cower in fear when she criticizes me and tries to control me, and I will never let her control me. I don't care that she's his mother. She started disrespecting me many years ago, so I lost all respect for her. Which is why, when my husband came back from work, I told him what she said, and he was absolutely flabbergasted. But he told me that he would speak to her. I heard them arguing all the way downstairs, and later on she came to me in the kitchen while I was making dinner, and she asked if she could help me. She apologized for what she had said about me, and she said it had nothing to do with not believing me, and more to do with just some genetic testing in case my kids or my husband needed blood donations in the future. She must have thought that I'm a fool, or that I'm hard at hearing. I heard her very clearly questioning my dignity, but I've decided to let it go, only for the sake of my husband. The poor man has been stressed all week. They're overworking him at work, and he's also been doing a bit of studying because he needs additional training. It's not really about money for him, but about being able to achieve something more. I fully support him as he had supported me in the past, and we're a couple, a pair, and we must have each other's back. On that note, his birthday's coming up in 2 weeks. I suck at surprises and creativity, so I wanted to ask for some ideas about what I could do for him for his birthday. I want to make sure that he has a good day and that he forgets about his troubles for a while. He's been working hard, and I want to do something special for him. Ideally, I would have done something with just the two of us, but knowing his mom, she'll be the third wheel. But at least these days she has shut up about the video and has been behaving. I hope it's the last time I hear about it. I've never cheated on my husband or even thought about it. We have a very strong relationship, and no amount of suspicion because of some stupid video is going to change that. Update number 2. She went behind our backs. Today was my husband's birthday. I decided to have a simple barbecue with our friends and family. Then on the weekend, we plan to go to a resort where we can, get to refresh. Work's been better for him. Next week, he will officially start his new position. So this dinner was both a birthday and a celebration. Everything went down without a hitch. Soon, all the kids went to bed and his friends left, and only a few family members remained. And they were actually going to sleep over and then return home the next morning. This was due to the fact that most of them have been drinking. My mother-in-law said that she had a present for my husband that she had been waiting to give him now for a while. She said that he would really appreciate it, and she got it for him because she loved him. Then she handed him an envelope. We all wondered what it was, but we waited as he opened it. He frowned as he read through the contents, and then he asked his mother what this was all about, and his cousin snatched the paper from him, asking what it was. He read the contents and then showed me and an uncle, who was next to me sitting. They all looked at me like I had 2 heads or something. I asked for the paper so that I could read it on my own. Guys, it was a paternity test for all 3 of my children and husband. The test results shocked me. Suddenly, I started to feel hot flashes, and I found my knees becoming weak. It stated that my second child, Chris, was not my husband's child. This simply did not make any sense. He was my husband's son. I mean, come on. So I say, "Where did you get this?" "Oh, I got paternity tests done." "Did you know about this?" I asked my husband, and he shook his head and he looked numb. His eyes were vacant, and I went to tug on him so that we could talk away from these people, and this had to be some sort of cruel joke or a dream. But he told me 4 words. "Do not touch me." And then everyone started speaking all at once, and they asked me questions I did not know the answers to. They called me a cheater, and told me that I had to leave, and my husband just shook his head, and out the door he went. I tried to follow, but Margaret pulled me back and told me that I had already done enough. How had I done enough? I've never slept with anybody but him. I told everybody to get the heck out of my house, and they were causing me a headache. Margaret told them to stay. I was the one who was in the wrong, and she had the proof. "This is fake." I took the papers and ripped it apart, and she gave me a pitiful look and said that she had been right. It made sense to her that Chris was not Michael's child because they simply did not look alike. Did she understand how genes work? She was talking utter nonsense, and Chris had so many of his father's characteristics, but to my horror, Uncle Peter agreed. They told me to sit down, tell them the cold hard truth about who Chris's father is. The whole thing was very stressful for me, and I could not get a word in. All I could do was cry, which was not going to help the situation at all. "Why are you crying? You're crying because you're guilty, aren't you?" Margaret would not stop taunting me. I tried to call Michael and tell him that this was all a hoax created by his mother, who hates me and would even lie to prove a point. I sat there while they said all they wanted to say, expecting me to keep quiet. I was caught between anger and dread, and my focus was on the results I had torn apart. I know you must be thinking, maybe I slipped up. But I thought there was no way. Well, unless I have a very selective memory. But I'm telling you, there's nothing here. I am going to sleep, I announced out loud, interrupting somebody who was talking nonsense about me. And that's when Uncle Peter says, "You have to tell us who the father is first." "I've told you 1,000,000 times I'm innocent." I was exhausted at this point, and I glared at all them, daring them to say something to me, and I wanted to see if they were going to tie me to a chair and make me confess to something I did not do. But they backed off, and I was able to go to bed finally, but I could not sleep a wink. Even though I was tired, it was not guilt but fear that kept me awake. Michael had been really upset, and I was afraid of what he would do. I think I ended up going, to sleep, just dozing off early in the morning. When I woke up, I felt terrible still as I touched his side of the bed, but he wasn't there. When I came downstairs, my mother-in-law was sitting all alone. She had a suitcase in front of her, and when she saw me, she said, "Oh, good, you're awake." "Are you leaving?" "No, but when my son comes home, I don't want you here." "I'm not going anywhere." I raised my voice, and before I knew it, I was shouting at her and asking her why she hated me so much that she would lie about this. She showed me another copy of the results and told me that they had been done at a lab. I could call them if I wanted to, but they would tell me the results were not tampered with. I did not leave. I told her she could leave if she wanted to, and the kids know nothing. And I told her that if she dared tell them a lie, I would slap her with a lawsuit so fast. Right now, I'm focusing on trying to contact him. I've asked his friends, and they have said they haven't seen him. I'm not sure if they're just being truthful or covering up, but I guess we shall see. Update number 3. Hey everyone, thanks for the support over the past couple of days. To say that it's been hell would be an absolute understatement. Never have I been so embarrassed and had my honor questioned. It did not end that day, when Margaret publicly called me out in front of the whole family. The family did what they did best, and they spread the news as far as they could. By the time Monday rolled around, I went to work. Well, guess what? Everybody knew. It had been wishful thinking that none of the people at work knew about what happened. They knew exactly what happened, and they had no sympathy for me. They asked me inappropriate questions to the point where I absolutely snapped. My boss called me and, gave me a few days off work so that I could deal with the crisis. He tried to be nice about it, but I could see the judgment in his eyes. I used to be respected at my workplace, but now I'm seen as some loose woman. All because of Margaret. I was deeply annoyed when I got back home, and the kids already knew what happened. They did not hate me, they were the only people who believed me. I told them it was just rumors and people being mean, and I allowed them to stay home for a few days. Michael came back home on Tuesday, and he said he thought about it, but he still did not know what to believe, so for now he was going to sleep in the guest room. I'd already called the lab, and they told me that an investigation proved those were the correct results. I kept looking at the results, trying to find anything that could prove my innocence, and then something caught my eye. It was Christopher's age. It was wrong. His birthday was wrong, and the results showed he was a year younger than he was. A misprint, maybe. I checked through all the others, and they were fine, but with the one Christopher, I saw so many errors. I knew my own child and everything about him, then why the hell did it indicate that he was a year younger? I ran all the way to the guest room at 2 a.m. to wake Michael up, and he was a bit groggy, but he agreed to look through them. So, I left him to do so as I went online looking for another lab, and we had to go and get a retest. Why did I not think of that before? Wow! It had all been right in front of my eyes, and I simply did not see it. I should have looked a bit closer at the results, and of course they were fake. But when the lab told me that there was no mistake, I stopped even thinking about it. He joined me later on and told me that yes, the results are very suspicious. I asked if he was prepared to do a test, and this time it would be all of us, just to rule out any possibility. He told me that despite what he had seen, he was finding it hard to believe that his mother would lie, but was okay with doing the test. Guess what? It came out positive, then we would all just move on. I did not argue, and she has to pay. But as long as we're going to do the test, we were going to do the test. And then I was going to prove that his mother has bad intentions. So, this morning we took our samples and sent them off to a lab. We did not tell a word to anyone just to make sure that no one could tamper with the results. Michael and I have been very awkward with each other, and I can tell that he wants to believe me. But if he does, then it means his mother is a liar. So it's just not sitting well with him, and he's still sleeping in the guest room. I avoided talking to his mom, just the sight of her makes me sick. She's ruined my reputation, and everyone's talking about me at work. Even my juniors have started to show disrespect for me. I've decided that once the results are returned and I prove my innocence, she's going to leave my house and she will be banned from my home. If her son wants to keep in contact with her, then that's on him. What I know is that I'm done keeping quiet. She's been doing this for 13 years that I've been married to Michael. Even before then, she never quite accepted, but it was subtle. Because she did not think that he would marry me, but every year her hatred for me grew. And she goes the extra mile to make my life a living hell. I'm done letting her control my life. I'm Chloe, not her doormat, not her friend. If she wants to mess with me, then I'll show her why I'm both feared and respected at work. When I put my mind to solving a problem, I solve it, and don't leave room for it to occur again. The results will be ready in the next couple of days, and I'm counting down the days until I can tell her to leave my house. I cannot wait to see the look on her face. She's gone too far this time by involving my kids, who know nothing. I hope that Michael will realize just how toxic his mother is to our marriage. If he does not, then maybe this marriage is not serving me. I thought we had trust, but he does not believe me. Well, did he? I'll let you know what happens next as soon as I can. Update number 3. The test results have came back. Well, guys, I got the test results back. They called me first and told me that I could come to fetch them. I already knew the contents and I just had to show them to the people who needed to hear them the most. Well, I sent messages to every single family member that had been present on the day of my humiliation, telling them that we need an urgent family meeting and that it was about what happened the other day. Margaret tried to make me spill the beans, asking if I was finally ready to confess. But I told her that she just needed to wait, just like everybody else. She looked satisfied and sure that there was no way I could prove my innocence. While I was preparing for the meeting, I get a phone call. That call changed everything, making me more determined to make sure that this meeting goes well. For if no one believed me, then she could do this to somebody else, which I would never forgive myself for. When the time for the meeting came, I had copies of the test results with me. I told everybody to open them up, one by one. Their mouths dropped as they observed what was written. Chris is Michael's child, and has always been. I explained to them how everything started, and that this was Margaret's plan to make my husband lose trust in me because she hated me. She laughed and said that I made up a fake result and they had all seen the real results. People start arguing at this point, with some taking my side and others taking hers. It got to the point where they were calling each other names, and it was time for the final blow. Margaret, forget those results. The lab that she got them, done at, is the same one where her nephew, Isaiah, works. That doesn't prove anything. She scoffed, so confident in herself. Well, the lab did an investigation after I showed them that Christopher's age was wrong on the results, and they have the evidence that points right to Isaiah tampering with the results. They're just now looking for proof that it was you. As far as I knew, he would sing very soon. Everybody gasped. How could you try to ruin your son's wedding? Uncle Peter explained. She opened up and closed her mouth like a goldfish. She had nothing to say. She tried to speak to Michael, but he had just raised a hand, silencing her, and I could see that his eyes were glassy. This must have really hurt him. She started calling me names and a liar, but everybody told her to shut up. They were disgusted that she would do paternity tests on kids that were not hers without their permission of the parents, and then lie. Well, she did all sorts of illegal stuff just so that she could prove a point. It felt good to watch her be the family's black sheep for once. And by tomorrow, everybody will know that I was innocent, and I will get my reputation back. She kept trying to explain and making me seem like a bad person, and finally I decided to do what I wanted to do from the very first day that she moved in here. I told her to get out of my house and never come back. She went on her knees in front of Michael and said, "I don't want to see you. Please leave us alone." She just sat there staring at the floor, and I sighed, went upstairs, and started packing her stuff. Someone helped me pack the clothes, and I was told that they managed to throw her out of the house. She was crying, screaming, when I finally faced her so that I could tell her this. If you ever come near Michael, the house, or our children again, then we will have you arrested for stalking. We don't want to see you ever again. I threw her bags at her feet, and she just kept on crying and begging, but that fell on deaf ears. She left when we threatened to call the police, and last I heard she was back at her house. She has not been talking to anyone. She is the talk of the town and is being investigated by the lab. Once they prove that she's guilty, she will be charged. The situation is serious, and she might be facing some serious charges. I think her little link at the lab is close to snitching on her. If he does not, then he'll have a bad record and might not be able to work at a lab again. As for our family, well, we're taking it slow. Final update. Hey guys, I just wanted to update you on what's been happening for the past 3 months. She and Isaiah were found guilty of illegal testing and tampering with the results, and Isaiah lost his job and spent a few months in jail. She was lucky, though, because she got a fine, and is just on probation. Her age probably has something to do with it, because they gave her such a light sentence. She did not try to contact us again, although she did send Michael a message apologizing. After the ordeal, our whole family was shaken. I was also upset with Michael for even believing that I was capable of this. We were like strangers living together. Eventually, he confronted me and told me that he knew that I resented him and that he was sorry for that. And he said that it was hell to have to think that it was true and that I betrayed him, because he never thought I would ever betray him. So, for the past couple of months, we have been taking it slow and just focusing on healing and, well, regaining our trust. As they say, time heals all wounds, and it's healed them when it comes to Michael and me. I've forgiven him for not believing in me. I understand that he was under a lot of stress and pressure. Next month, we're going on a family holiday so that we can recuperate and forget about all the craziness of the past few months. I believe we will be okay.
Okay guys, so this one had some very, very interesting thoughts in the comment section. And why do I say that? It's nothing to do with the mother-in-law. Heck, it's nothing to do with OP. It has everything to do with Michael. Michael was the topic of the comment section because half of the people were saying, how could you not believe your wife when you already know all the red flags that your mother basically hates your wife? But there were other people in the comment section arguing left and right, saying it doesn't matter if there was red flags. She had a legit laboratory test that says he's not the father. Well, I need to know where you guys are coming from. Which side would you land on? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you were in Michael's position, would you trust OP? Or would you trust your mom? I mean, this is a hard decision for some people. Let me know your thoughts. Drop it right down below in the comment section. If you guys are new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every single day. My mother-in-law's a nightmare. She thinks I'm a freeloader. She thinks that I'm just taking advantage of her son so I can live in this gigantic house all by myself while he's away. Well, little does she know, I'm the one paying the mortgage here. And there's something else I need to tell you guys about this nightmare mother-in-law.
Hi everyone. I have a bit of a problem and I would really like your help. I've been unfortunately made to stay with my mother-in-law from hell. I've even tried to be polite to her and I really don't want to kick her out. I've always respected people older than me and have never had a problem with her in particular. However, ever since she started to stay with me, it's been hell, and I found myself disliking her. My husband is out of the country. He's in the military and will not be home for a very long time. He has been the main breadwinner ever since I stopped working due to my epilepsy. I've been keeping myself busy with courses though. Every once in a while, I'm able to work on some projects, so it's not like I don't have my own money. I get my husband's check every single month, so there's nothing that I do not have. I wanted to hire someone to stay with me and just make sure that I did not suffer any epileptic attacks alone. Instead, my mother-in-law felt it would be a waste of time and suggested that she should move in instead. She's now in her mid-60s, but she's still very active and young-looking. When she came to visit us before my husband was deployed, she expressed how unhappy she was because she was living alone now that all her kids are grown. She has a daughter who's older than my husband. She lives on a farm halfway across the country with her husband and about 5 kids. The last time I heard, she was pregnant. My husband suggested that maybe she should visit her sister, or at least ask her to send one of her grandkids to keep her company. The only problem is that my sister-in-law only ever listens to her husband. Her husband does not want the kids to be exposed to technology or the outside world, so he never agrees for them to be away from home for a long time. A few days before my husband left, I had the worst fit ever. No one was home except my mother-in-law, who was at least able to help me get to the hospital. Keep in mind that she's frail, 67-year-old woman. When the emergency operators took so long to respond, she managed to drive me to the hospital on her own. I am not a light woman and was having a fit. I can only imagine how she was feeling. When I've gotten some treatment and was waiting for test results from the doctor, she stayed with me. When my husband finally came to the hospital, she was upset with him. She felt as if she had not chosen to get deployed, that he should have taken my condition into consideration. "She is your wife. You took a vow to protect her," she said. He looked very distraught and stressed. She meant well, but that was his job, and I could never ask him to leave it for me. My husband's been in the army for 10 years now, and it's the job that he loves. We've managed to make it work, even though I'm always scared of getting that phone call. He is the most selfless and brave person out there. When I feel weak, he has always been my anchor. I know that if I ask him to stay with me, he would stay in a heartbeat, even though it would mean that he has to give up his passion, but I could never do that. He has already been off duty for a while since my situation started. I put on a brave smile and told my mother-in-law that she did not need to scold him. I told her that he was going to go, and I was going to take care of myself or look for someone to take care of me. The issue ended there, or so I thought. What I did not know was that my mother-in-law went behind my husband and asked him if she could stay with me and take care of me until he came back. Already, I was looking into alternative treatment options, and those would cost a lot of money, so would hiring someone. She offered to stay for free, take care of me, and make sure that, well, when he came back, I was going to be okay. When he explained it to me, I had reservations, mainly because she's older and I don't want her to have to take care of me all the time. In addition to that, I did not want to look weak in front of her. Already her son was going away. She needed to see me be strong, and that was easier when we were apart from each other. I did not want to worry her at all about my health, but she insisted, and that was how she came to stay at my home. You know, in the beginning, we stayed with each other in harmony. I did most of the chores and cooking in the beginning until she took over because we have 2 different diets. That was understandable because of my health condition. I have some food that I eat and some that I should not eat at all. This led to a few fights when she took ingredients meant for me. Well, I know that most people would probably not, but I started seeing someone who told me that they had natural remedies to help with my symptoms. Those remedies really helped, and the only thing was that my mother-in-law was not a fan of herbs or natural medicine. She's a devout Christian, and while she does believe in medicine, she does not believe in natural medicine. I didn't know how much it offended her, so I thought it would be no trouble bringing my healer, Sheila, to my house. She wanted to show me how to make some remedies and also help me with my spirit. I know many people think it's just mumbo-jumbo, but I would like to ask those people if they were faced with a loved one who had a chronic illness, would they not even try to help them with it? Well, I was tired of feeling great for a while, but when the feeling of pain for days on end, I could not work. For context, my mother-in-law does not know that I'm working. I knew that she would not be happy, so Jean and I chose not to tell her. Either way, one day, she came home from Bible study with a friend to find the house covered in incense. I was feeling better since Sheila came to visit, and I had just gone to the hospital the previous day and they told me that I was on the right track. I can't even remember when the last time I was fit was. I did suffer from chronic pain and migraines for some days, but I was back to normal. Each day I felt stronger thanks to the combination of my treatment and Sheila's remedies, which the doctor knew about and did not oppose it, by the way, so while I was having sessions with Sheila, my mother-in-law came back and she was mad as hell. She accused me of devil worshipping and committing sins in her son's house. Then she and her friends started praying for me and Sheila. The last straw was when they started to destroy Sheila's things, calling them dirty. I shouted at her to stop what she was doing, but she did not. In the end, Sheila left in a fit of rage. She refused to speak to me after what happened and told me to find someone else to help heal me. Well, I have no one to help me now. It's hard to find someone who's not a scammer. I've spoken to my mother-in-law about it and told her that I did not appreciate the way she kicked out someone who was supposed to help me. She told me that she was left in charge of my health by my husband. I know that she takes care of me on days that are tough, but she is not my nurse. It is the money that I spent on trying to heal myself. I don't know why she refuses to understand, but I hate it. She has not spoken to me in days. I refuse to speak to her, but I have to pretend I'm getting along with her when my husband calls because I don't want him to be stressed. I do, however, want her out of my house. Please tell me what I should do because this is my house and I don't want her to make me feel uncomfortable. The more she treats me like this, the more worked up I get, and that's not good for my health. Update number 1. First of all, I would like to address a few questions I have about my condition. I've suffered from epilepsy for over 2 years. I'm a 34-year-old and should be at lower risk for it. Unfortunately, I suffered a mini stroke while at work, and this came after a series of deaths in the family. I started stressing a lot, suffering from fatigue, etc. I started having confusion staring into space sometimes, and this made me mess up at work, and I should have got it checked out, but I did not. Then one morning, I suffered a stroke while I was eating breakfast with my husband. It was minor, and once I was out of the hospital, I went back to work. I started taking better care of myself and feeling better, until one day, I had the fit. It was horrifying. The aftermath was not the greatest, but my husband was my rock, and he took care of me, luckily. And our son, Luca, was in boarding school, so he never had to see me in that condition. He's 10 years old, and he already knows everything there is to know about the condition and is able to support me. But boy, am I glad that he's at boarding school, so he does not have to deal with it. So yes, I can have big fits, small ones, or even just involuntary jerking that lasts a few short seconds. Now back to the update. Things between my mother-in-law and me got worse. I did not leave my room for days on end, and when I needed to eat, I ordered something or snuck into the kitchen when she was not there. Our relationship was not good at all. We just hated each other. She made it seem like she was the boss of the house, and she did what she wanted when she wanted. She started to change the order of things when she knew that it would confuse me, so she starts to have people over for dinner and make a lot of noise. I'm talking bingo, quiz nights, was now being held here at my home. All this time, I was depressed and stressed, and I wanted her gone. I felt that she was to blame for everything that was going on in my life, but after a while, I knew that I did not want to wallow in self-pity. I confided in a friend about what was going on, and she suggested that I should stay with her for a while. She said she would monitor me and everything, and she has a big penthouse apartment which is very spacious and that has everything that I would ever need. She was gracious enough to let me stay there, and I was beyond grateful because I finally could work in peace. I told my mother-in-law that I would stay for 2 weeks, but that turned into a month. Then my husband sent me a text message telling me that he did not appreciate how I've been treating his mother. She went running to him, telling him that I've been mean and rude to her and making stuff up. He was angry about me leaving her alone in the house, and I told him he did not have to worry because she had the entire old age village in our house all day, every day. Even though it is my house, she has taken over and there's no more space for me to breathe. He asked to call me via video call, and that was one of the worst fights we've ever had as a couple. He told me that I was using my condition to drive a rift between him and his mother, because I don't want to share him with anyone. I told him that his mom just wants to freeload in our house and not have to pay bills. She's flaked on me so many times when I need her. She treats me like I do not contribute anything to the house, and all she goes on about is how her son is the only reason I'm still in that house. Of course, he denied that Mommy Dearest was toxic. So we called each other names, and then he said something that we never came back from. You're so selfish. I feel like you're always sick, and the only one I should be worrying about. You don't even know that we have a son, right? Huh. I wish I never married such a selfish woman. Well, I shut the laptop in his face and I cried. He texted me for days afterward trying to apologize, but I ignored him. I was a nervous wreck and came so close to an attack. But I don't know how I pulled myself together. Maybe I sensed that what was to come needed to have as much strength as possible. A week after the last time I spoke to my husband, I was told that he had unfortunately succumbed to his injuries and was no more. I didn't even know that he got injured. I'd been in such of my head that I did not answer him and his mother's calls. I want to go back to the day and tell him that I love him, and that I did not mean those words that I said. I would stay with his mother in peace for years if it only meant that he would come back. But now, tomorrow I must prepare to see him. Give me strength, please, for I'm failing. Update 2 weeks later. Hey everyone. I'm very sorry that I did not get to post an update after my last one. I was highly emotional and I'm even shocked that I managed to update you at all. I had to write it while I was on my way back home to speak to my mother-in-law. I did not know if she had heard yet, but I knew that we needed to be with each other. Suddenly, all the fights which had been having just seemed that much more trivial. I had to tell my husband's mom that he was no more, and I also had to tell my son. My poor Luca had been looking forward to playing football with his father when it was school holidays. I was so scared. I felt as if I was going crazy as I realized that my rock was gone and I had to remain strong for our baby. But I didn't. I did not falter. I knew that he would not want me to be this weak. He would tell me to sit right up, put on a brave face, and make sure that I planned everything perfectly, and so that's what I did. I came back home to find that my mother-in-law was sitting in the living room and there were pictures of Jean scattered all over. I sat down next to her and put a hand on her shoulder. We looked at each other and she broke down in tears, and we spent the rest of the day just sitting there amongst his pictures looking. Eventually, I had to get up to make phone calls so that I could start making arrangements as well as breaking the news to our family and friends. By the time I made the last phone call, I was so numb and tired. I saw that my son's headmaster had sent me an email that he would be on the way back the next morning. I dreaded having to tell him in person, but it was better than having someone else tell him. The next morning, he was back home and I broke the news to him after he had just freshened up. He did not take it well, but at least I was there to comfort him. I told him that his father was a very brave man who died doing what he loved. The following week was a haze as I had to make his funeral arrangements. I did not have to much as the military took care of expenses. I just had to focus on making sure the right people were there and things ran smoothly. He had a beautiful funeral that was fitting for him. I was able to go back to work within a few days. As for my son, he had about 2 weeks off school so that he could grieve. My mother-in-law never left her room. I saw her when I gave her the food, and I understood exactly what it was she was going through, and I wanted to support her. She stayed in her room for at least a week, and then after some time, she started leaving it to take a shower and eat some more food. I tried to be as supportive as possible, but I did not know what words could even comfort a grieving mother. When my son returned to school, I had to start getting used to living alone. I took things slowly, but I was making progress. This was until my mother-in-law came from nowhere and told me that she wants me to leave her home. Yeah, she said that it's her house. Well, I was confused when one day I got home and saw my things packed up. She told me that I could stop pretending to care about her son since she knows that he's no more. I told her that of course I cared about him. He was my husband. But she insisted that I did not respect him and that it was my fault that when he passed away we were on bad terms. She also said she did not appreciate how I had been trying to get rid of her so that I could spend his money. I told her that she would not speak like that to me. She had made me uncomfortable in my own home, and that's why I had left. Then she made him turn against me, and that was why we were not on speaking terms when I lost him. Then she showed me a piece of paper, and it took me by surprise. He had left all his assets to his mother. Everything. Talk about messing up my life from beyond the grave. It was clearly his will, even his lawyer confirmed it. He had changed it over a year ago. He left me some money, but it said that all his assets would go to his mother. However, the checks, which was coming from the military, was going to be mine and Luca's. She told me that since it was his assets, that meant that the house, his car, everything was going to her. I asked how she made him do it. She told me that she had agreed with her son that if anything happened to me, then she would take care of our son. But a year ago, I was fine. Well, except that one time when I nearly didn't make it. You have no idea how much it sucks to know that your husband had no faith in you surviving. I knew that he did not want to screw me over with this, but he did, and now she was kicking me out of the house. I let her drive me out, let her think she won, but there are things that she does not know, and they will be revealed very soon. Just remain patient, I will tell you everything. Update number 3. When she told me to get out, I refused. The lawyer came and clarified it said all assets, which would also include the home. I was beside myself with anger. I wanted to shake her. She was so smug as she told me that she was not running a charity. She told me that since I had no job, I was not going to be of any use to her, and that hurt a lot. So I left, knowing what I knew. I tried to be nice in the beginning, but I did not want to displace an old lady. I'd been planning on shipping her off to her daughter's house, but now that was impossible because of this complication. So, I spoke to Jean's sister and told her the situation, then begged her to take her mother in. She spoke to her mom, who said some very unkind words to her. She told her that she was a traitor and was not welcome at the house. It was like she had gone mad. Surely it had to be because of grief, so I tried to appeal to her. I could not part with that house. It's been my house for the past decade. We planned to have more kids and fill those empty rooms, but now we're not going to get to do that. I told her that, hoping it would just emotionally appeal to her. But she refused. She told me that she felt I was a burden left by her son and that she was not going to take care of me for a second longer. I told you. I tried to reason with her, but she did not want to be reasoned with, so I tried to give her an option. Get her to stay with her daughter, but she did not want to. I even moved out, hoping that she would change her mind. I was empathetic to her situation, but she did not deserve it. I had no choice but to do this to her, and I played the card. Well, you know how I've been working online, right? Well, I make a lot of money. Enough to cover the mortgage, and I've been paying our mortgage for many years now. From the very first payment, that was our deal. He pays for everything else while I pay for the mortgage because of the kind of job he has. Nobody even knew. It was our secret. And now it was about to come to light, but now I've lost patience with her. She has shown that she does not care about me. She has no loyalty to me, and so I have none to her now. So, I talked to my lawyer and explained the exact situation to him. Everything. He told me that I could easily get a court order and have her thrown out because it's my house after all, since I'm the one that paid for it. That's what I'm going to do. No matter how she begs, I'm throwing her out. I'm tired of her. Final update. Hey guys, just a quick update. I followed through on my original plan. I've read the comments where you raised the issue of how ethical it is, but you must understand that this woman has been treating me like dirt from the day she moved in. In the 10 years that I've been her daughter-in-law, I've also noticed that she has also been very dismissive of me. And also, she did not even consider how Luca would feel not being able to live in that house with his mom. She was willing to throw me under the bus, so I did not see what was wrong with me doing the same thing. I sent her multiple notices telling her to vacate the house because it's legally mine, but she refused. I waited for the days stipulated on the notice to pass, and then I arranged for a forced removal. I tried to make this as easy as possible for her, but she didn't want it. She ignored my texts and my messages till I had no choice. On the day that we kicked her out, she unfortunately had people over. Some ladies that she was drinking tea and gossiping with. I recognized the one who kicked Sheila out and gave her the evil eye. I told my people to make sure that nothing was hers that was left in the house, and they got to work. She starts screaming at me, telling me that she was not going to leave. But, of course, in the end, all things were on the lawn. Well, I even took the courtesy of arranging for a van to put her stuff into storage until she could take it. Her friends were just watching the drama unfold and trying to attack me. But I had someone to protect me this time who made sure that they did not touch me. After minutes of fighting with her, she was off my premises. It was a completely legal process, and I did more than I should have. I guess I was just waiting for her to grow up and apologize for the way that she treated me in the past. But if there is one thing about her, it's that she had a lot of pride. She has nothing to complain about, though, because she won. She got the bulk of his assets, and when I was not left with much, but she would not stop talking about it. It was my worst nightmare to find out that she was renting an apartment in this town and refusing to leave. Randomly, I was getting texts from old women telling me to repent, and I'm going to hell. Well, I blocked every single number, but they just kept on coming. When they saw that they could not get a reaction out of me, that's when they decided to start harassing me in person. I'd be at the grocery store and have some ladies just give me a filthy look or throw something at me. The scariest was when they came to the house at night. My son was home for the holidays, so I was not alone. In spite of the drama, I was doing well and the doctors were positive about my condition. That was until I woken up from the nap in the living room by the sound of breaking glass. I found a brick with a little veiled threat basically telling me to watch my back. I was scared my son had been there. What if something had happened to him because of whoever she sent? And then I felt it. The warning signs of the attack. I called my son, who thankfully was awake, and told him to call my doctor. It was late, but my doctor was able to send someone to check on me. It was one of the worst ones. I ended up spending the night in the hospital. That was when I knew that I was not going to allow this woman to remain in this town anymore. So, the first thing when I got discharged, I went to the church. I knew the priest just from exchanging a few words when I got there. I told him the whole story, including what happened the previous night, and afterward I showed him the text that I've been receiving. He was very empathetic about my situation and offered me comfort if I ever needed it. Side note, I go to church regularly these days now. The next day I get a visit from the ladies. My mother-in-law was nowhere to be found, though. They did apologize and promised to leave me alone, though. They also told me that she's no longer allowed to come to the church because she did not want to apologize. I thought that it would not be the end of it. Well, that she would stay fighting. But she packed all her stuff up and left. I've never seen her again after that, and her friends that she was counting on switched sides as soon as they smelt trouble, which was a very wise decision on their part. It's been 3 months now since what happened, and I'm doing well. I've been feeling so strong lately. I've even gone back to the office, and there's enough support for me there, and it helps me to feel normal. My son, he's doing well in school, and he's attending grief counseling to help him deal with his father's death. As for myself, well, I've decided that I want to sell this house and get a smaller apartment. I don't see myself moving on from my husband. It's not that I'm over his death. It's just that I don't think that anyone could ever make me as happy as he did. It's sad for you to hear, right? But I'm doing just fine.
Okay, so this story had so many sad parts to it. I think the death was definitely the saddest part because it ripped people apart. However, that does not excuse mother-in-law for the way that she was acting. I want to know what you guys think about this though. If you were in OP's position and you had to go through everything that OP went through, how do you handle it? Do you think OP did too much or too little? My father-in-law accused me of stealing money from the family business, but little does he know, I already knew about his dirty secret. So, at the next family gathering, I decided to expose him for every secret that he has, including his secret family.
Hey guys, I'm in a bit of a dilemma. I'm here for the internet to give me a bit of advice. My father-in-law, Richard, falsely accused me of embezzlement to get rid of me and separate me from my husband, Alex. So I called his secret family over to Alex's birthday party, exposing him to everyone. I'm honestly posting this because things are tense at home, and I have no one to vent to because everyone is not exactly happy about the fact that I revealed his side chick in public manner. So, I'll provide a bit of context. I've been dating Alex for almost 5 years when I proposed to him on a romantic date. He almost immediately said yes. Alex has been with me at my worst and taken me higher than my best. His parents have been with us through the relationship. They know me. I was a broke college student when they met me. I'm laid back and they're uptight. They know I'm not posh or anything, so of course his parents had their inhibitions and reservations when it came to me. I'd always known that marrying into Alex's family would come with its own bit of challenges. They're affluent, rich people with pretty good influence. Alex's father, Richard, well, he owns, along with his siblings, an established consultancy business, and they're very popular around here. It was hard for them to trust me, an outsider from a big city. I'd proposed to Alex, and that's not vice versa, so they presumed I was just after their son's wealth. I'm also a year older, and they struggled to grasp that Alex and I were actually in love. They'd constantly hover around Alex and make sure all his needs are taken care of. It was pretty annoying at first, but it later got harmful to me. They've always held him up to a certain standard, so obviously they were weary of me. After all, Alex was their only son. Apparently, they don't get along with their daughters, and they had always been tight-knit. But I never could have predicted just how difficult things would get. When I married Alex, I never could have anticipated the stormy relationship I would have with Richard. You see, Richard always saw me as an unwelcome addition to their prestigious family. They'd sneer at my parents subtly, and making backhanded comments and showing off their wealth left and right. They considered me a country bumpkin with no sophistication, even though I told them I grew up in the city. The tension escalated dramatically when, weeks before our wedding, he falsely accused me of embezzling money from the family business. It was at a get-together with almost all the relatives and people from around town. Well, for him to accuse me of such was a pretty big blow to my career and reputation. He told me off in front of everyone and pointed fingers at me like I was the cause of every problem in his life. Well, as soon as he started, literally everybody in the room corroborated their own stories with his. Mind you, these were only assumptions and suspicions. There was no actual proof was ever found. I would have been slaughtered right then and there, but Alex protected me and shut all their mouths up. He said that if I were taking money, it was his money, and I had a right to it. He then said I had integrity and that I would never touch a single penny of his without his consent. His display of faith shut their mouths up instantly, but the damage was done. Jenna, Alex's mother, cut Alex off from a lot of their finances and instead chose to provide him a salary for his work in the company instead of having all the accounts open to him. She promised that she would provide him with whatever he needed, but that she would not risk a rat like me stealing their hard-earned money. Well, with all my job opportunities gone, we struggled the first couple of months, but we cut back and hustled our butts off. Despite the lack of evidence, The scandal rocked our lives, and my reputation was tarnished. I was ostracized from family events, and many within the family social circles believed the accusations. My career in that town absolutely went down the drain, and instead opted to work for a major company outside the town where nobody would even know me. Initially, I would travel far, but eventually they allowed me to work from home after testing my competence. Even though Alex stood by my side the entire time, the ordeal was so traumatic and created a seemingly irreparable rift between Richard and me. A lot fewer people came to our wedding, and the ones that did looked at me with disdain. My wedding was completely ruined over Richard's baseless accusations and finger-pointing. I thought it'd get better eventually, but boy, I was wrong. I was in for a long, exhausting ride, and I even had to arrange for another cake at the last minute because the bakery making our cake were old family friends of Richard and Jenna. It was all really hectic. You know how all girls dream of that perfect wedding, right? Yeah, my wedding was crappy and tainted by the hatred I got. Still, as long as Alex was still by my side, I was willing to pull through. Our wedding did not define us. Post-wedding, Richard's tactics became more insidious. I thought having kids would fix it, but frankly, it made it very worse. You know, we had kids, so they could not even separate us without hassles anymore. They could not play childish tricks to pull us apart at this time. They were even more mad at the fact, so it got worse. Richard would openly undermine me during family gatherings, favor his other grandchildren over our kids, and just constantly try to convince Alex to accept a job abroad, hoping to strain our relationship. Alex never wanted to move out. We were comfortable right where we were. Alex's mother was quick to criticize my parenting choices and undermine my authorities as a mom. Even though she acted like they were the devil's spawn, she'd often question my decisions, suggesting that I was not doing things the right way or that I was making mistakes that could harm my babies. When I asked her what to do and I just wanted some general advice from her, she would not even bother replying. She would just never look at my kids or be nice to the way she treated her niece's children. So, getting closer to why I'm posting this today. To the day I discovered evidence of Richard's infidelity. So, one day, while I was at the company office to give Alex his forgotten lunch, he asked me to go to the inventory and drop off a document in Richard's office and fetch some property papers on which they wanted to build a new residential complex. While looking for these old family documents in Richard's office, I came across a series of letters. Letters from an unknown woman and child, and all referring to Richard as their father. I mean, I was not intending to snoop, but here I was scanning documents and it caught my eye. I read through the whole first page, absorbing as much information as I could, and I was stunned. This man had been seeing her for almost 10 years. My shock quickly turned to outrage as I realized that Richard had a secret family. Catherine. You see, this woman was only a couple years older than me and Alex. And as I read on, I found out that they even had a young daughter together. This had been going on for so long, even longer than our marriage, and I could not believe Richard was a pervert as well as a cheater. It just grossed me out, honestly, and I quickly kept the letters back. But not before knowing, well, exactly what was in them, so I jotted down Catherine's address. Over the next few days, I contemplated whether to reveal this to Alex or not. You see, Alex loved his father so much, and I wondered whether his daughters already knew. Maybe that's the reason they did not get along. I was never welcome in the family, but maybe that's why I decided that the next push I'd get, it would be game over for old Richard. And you know what? It didn't even take a week. I was back in the office lounge with Alex, and it was the evening time, and him and the lads took a break from work on a Friday, just to kick back, celebrate a huge successful tender bid for the company. Alex had gotten way too drunk to drive back home, so he called me to come get him. When I reached there, though, his buddies insisted that we hang around for some more time. I'd put my kids to sleep, and my best friend was next door, so heck, I thought, why not? I shot a text to my best friend to check up on the kids and that I'd be back soon. Well, it was all going smoothly until Richard brought up the incident at the get-together before my wedding. He laughed at how I got away with it and called me slick. He then mentioned that he was reviewing the CCTV cams in his office the other day and that he saw me enter, go through some papers, and leave with a document. I went pale, not wanting to explain why it took me so long for his sake. Alex sided with me and told him he was the one who sent me in there to get the document. Richard just shrugged sloppily and slurred out his words, calling me a thief. Alex got up and said he did not have the patience for this, and I grabbed his hand, and we left. Well, you know what? That was it for me. I was so done with all these false accusations that I decided I was absolutely going to annihilate his reputation. The very next morning, I went to Catherine's house through the address I pulled. She never mentioned whether she knew that Richard had a family or not already, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. Her house was very far away, so I told Alex I was visiting my parents, told my parents to cover for me, and drove off. It was 3 hours of driving, but thankfully, due to the empty roads, I got there in much less time. I got to their place, and she was actually very sweet. We talked for a bit, but she thought I was a sister missionary. She explained to me how her husband Richard was a private investigator, and how he got calls that were very far away, so he had to move around a lot. She further went on about how Richard would somehow make time for her and their daughter and visit almost every month. Yeah, very chatty woman. It did not take me long to juice all the information from her. Perhaps why Richard was able to make a fool out of her for this long. Well, after she unwittingly spilled the beans, I told her that I was actually his daughter-in-law and not actually from the church. At first she thought I was lying and asked me to leave, until I pulled out my phone and showed her my wedding photos with Richard in them. Well, then she stopped trying to push me to go and heard me out. I told her about Jenna, Alex, and his siblings. She wept so loudly as I went on, telling her how toxic he was, mistreating me and my children because I was not a very well-off family. I cleared out pretty soon after that, and I was already extremely late. I comforted her and told her my plan for revenge over the phone in the next few days. Catherine was very understanding of my rage and was very volatile herself. She wanted to confront Richard instantly, but I begged her, urged her to wait for the plan. As Alex's birthday party approached, I made a decision that would shatter the false facade Richard had so carefully maintained. Without informing anybody, I invited Richard's secret family to the party. Oh boy. The shock on Richard's face when they walked in was nothing short of gratifying. Catherine came in with her daughter, and everybody was so darn confused. Then I introduced her and explained to everybody how Richard was cheating on Jenna for almost a decade with this woman now, who, by the way, was 5 years older than I was. Catherine then told her side of the story, and it matched mine, adding details from her perspective and thrashing Richard. Her daughter just sat there eating cake and looking around, probably wondering why she's getting glares from the room. She was an only toddler, so she didn't really understand what was going on. Well, things escalated from there, and a full-blown argument ensued between Catherine and Jenna and Richard. The party for Alex was at our house, and Alex was fed up, and after quite a bit of back and forth, he asked everybody to leave. I actually don't know what happened after that, but Alex is a little annoyed, and I chose to act out instead of handing these more discreetly to him. Jenna called up to apologize and told me she was manipulated into thinking that I was the bad guy all these years. Well, I told her that does not excuse her behavior, and that it would take a lot more for me to forgive her. Things have been tense between me and Alex, so I wanted some advice and people to vent to. Well, hence why I posted this. Should I have dealt with this more quietly, or did I do the right thing? What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Oh boy, looks like we got ourselves in a sticky situation of a cheater. Well, there's multiple updates, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Update number 1. Hey guys, thanks for the advice and kind comments. I appreciate you all so much for allowing me a space to vent my problems. Well, not that it mattered, because when I posted, not even a day later, so many things went down. So, let me provide an update on what exactly happened next. Well, Jenna moved into our house, much to my reluctance. Alex and I made up a night or two ago. Y'all can guess how that went down. Jenna has been a quiet presence in our home. She is not really talking much and mostly just stays in the guest bedroom, occasionally popping out for tea and dinner, and I don't blame her. She lost her husband and world all at once. Richard actually stopped by the other day. It was chaotic and he acted so insolent. I can't even describe. Jenna literally had to intervene, and Richard and I got into a pretty heated screaming match. It was awful. He was screaming at me and calling me names, telling me I'd eventually die with the regret of ruining a family. Well, that's when I lost it. I told him the truth in plain terms. His marriage fell apart because of his actions and narcissism. I told him it did not matter if he had a successful business. He was a condescending cheater who always would be. Richard then tried to come at me, stomping angrily to God knows what, but Jenna quickly saw the rage in his eyes and grabbed a vase. And she threatened to smash it over his head if he came any closer. It was wild. He backed off pretty quickly after that, shuffling to leave out the front door like a rat. Jenna went wailing into her temporary bedroom, and I chased after her just to calm her down. I haven't heard from Catherine so far, but I honestly want to move on. Update number 2. Hey guys, I've seen all the comments asking me to check up on Catherine, and I see your point, but thankfully I don't even need to approach her. The fallout from the revelation was seismic. So, remember how I mentioned that Richard owned a business with his siblings? Well, they got curious as to where my father was getting so much money to support 2 families. They were going to crack down anyways, and there was a lot of income lost that just wasn't adding up. They brought Catherine in and asked her a couple of basic questions about how much he spent on her. She revealed that she lived a lavish lifestyle with her daughter, plenty of resources right there at her fingertips. This made them even more suspicious, and they went delving into accounts and ledgers. Well. It turns out Richard, he wasn't just a dirty cheater when it comes to a relationship. He was also cheating the business. And we're not talking about some thousands of dollars here and there. We're talking about a very, very large scale. It was unearthed that Richard had been using funds from the family business to support his secret family for years. This entire time, Richard was falsifying business records, fabricating tax records, and using fraud accounts to steal the money. This man had the audacity to point fingers at me for embezzlement? Somebody needs to point a mirror at this guy. It's just so damn ironic that he was found guilty of the same crime he accused me of. Maybe the guy was looking for a cover-up, a scapegoat. Well, it backfired pretty terribly, I'd say. He messed with the wrong person. And I did not find this out from Jenna or Alex, no. We all found this out from the freaking newspaper. That's right. This unearthing of the truth sent shockwaves through the family, sparking into a major legal dispute and, necessitating a complete restructuring of the family business. Apparently, Richard was about to go to jail, but they chose to settle it out of court. Alex got back his stakehold of the company, and Richard's part of the business was divided up between Jenna and her children. The family dynamics have been forever changed, and now I'm left wondering, am I the a-hole for uncovering this secret in such a public and dramatic manner? Update number 3. This is the final post. Hey y'all, I'm back for another update. I've read the comments saying I should be more private and I should not have done what I did. Honestly, I'm starting to think so too. Nobody gained anything. I mean, the revenge was so damn sweet, but still. I also read your advice to kick back and let things happen, and that everything that happened was for the best. But who's best? Ultimately, Alex matters the most to me, but he's not happy that his dad was a fraud and an infidel. Hopefully, he'll snap out of it soon, and meanwhile, I'm right here to support him. Catherine called me up the other day, just to congratulate me on successfully thwarting Richard and uprooting his life completely. She informed me that she was now looking for a job at her parents' house. She sold the house that Richard bought her and is living off that for now. Okay, so something unexpected happened a couple of hours ago. Alex's sister came over. Remember how I said Alex's sister cut contact with her father and never visited? So, they're sitting here now with Alex and Jenna catching up. Apparently, they found out because, surprise, surprise, Catherine was their college batchmate. They didn't say anything to Catherine. They just up and left after a huge fight, and neither of them was willing to reveal what went down, and they didn't even tell their mother and just left. But I think he blackmailed them or something. I'm not going to discuss it with Alex because he's just happy that they're back. I don't really know whether they're going to stay overnight or go, but honestly, as long as Alex is happy, I'm happy. Jenna filed a restraining order against Richard, and I don't know where he is. Even if Alex knows, he won't tell me, which is fine by me. So, thanks again, guys, for all the well wishes and kindness. That's probably my final update on this one. I'm focusing on work now, and I've cleared my name. I'm grateful for the support I've received here, and your advice was pretty useful.
Alright guys, Richard was out of hand in this one. I don't even know why he would go ahead and raise so many flags by making OP look like she stole the money, when in reality, the crime that he accused her of is the crime that he committed. Crazy how he wanted to bring that to light, and basically he told on himself. Luckily though, OP was able to find a few clues. Guys, let's talk about this in the comment section down below. Go ahead and drop your thoughts about this one. It was a wild ride. So apparently my baby that I'm about to have in a few months, I want to name her something unique. Something that doesn't really have to do with our Indian culture, but my mother-in-law is absolutely beside herself because of this. She's ruining my life and making my relationship with her son so difficult. That's why I'm coming to you guys for this help. But first, let's start at the beginning so I can tell you exactly what's wrong with my mother-in-law. Okay, let's get one thing straight. Why does every mother-in-law I know have to be nosy? I get it's her son and his kids, which makes it her grandkids, but there's a line in every situation, and she's clearly overstepping hers. Yeah, you guessed by the title that things aren't going to look pretty for me. But let me just throw this out there that the void in clarity why I didn't want to submissively agree to my mother-in-law's demands. Well, for one, it's my kid. Tell me when we weren't allowed to name our kids. And the next thing is, enough is enough. I've done it, and I've had it with her trying to tell me what to do and what not to do. So before I get into rant mode, it's better than I explain what happened from end to end so you know why I'm definitely not the a-hole. Having lived in the United States from the time my husband and I were born meant we are very much accustomed to how the Western lifestyle thing is. How is that a bad thing? We still celebrate all the festival Hindus celebrate. I've even missed school for it, so you can say I'm definitely not forgetting my culture and roots, but I have to say my culture and heritage have been watered down. What do you expect? I've never been to India. The most India I've experienced was at my wedding, where it felt like the whole of India was there. Wedding aside, I'm a mix of the two cultures, meaning whatever I do is a watered-down version of the Indian culture. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, is a staunch Indian culture fanatic.
I guess she's trying to preserve it, with it dying and all, but why impose on us? The story doesn't start here. Oh no. It starts way back when Jagan and I married and expected our first child. As a newly married couple with a child on the way, we were nothing but excited. And by the completion of a 6-month, we started discussing names for our first child. And we decided on the name Aria, since we were expecting a girl. It was the most beautiful name we've come up with, and in our blissful ignorance, we thought everything in the family would see the beauty in the name, and boy, I was wrong. On the 7th day after I've given birth, my mother-in-law had organized a family dinner and invited every Indian in the state that she knew. It was overcrowded and stuffy, to say the least. With drinks and festivities in the air, I thought this would be the perfect moment to let the whole family know our beautiful baby girl's name. So, Jagan raised his glass of champagne and clinked it with the spoon to get everybody's attention. He managed to get everybody's attention except for a few drunk uncles. And we told everyone the name we picked. Now, I don't know if this was foolish of me or if it was my blissful oblivion as a newly married individual, but I expected people to applaud, people to cheer. I've never had a child before. How was I supposed to know how things should pan out? No one reacts. Instead, it seems as though everyone's looking at my mother-in-law to ensure they haven't reacted the wrong way. Before I continue anymore, let me give you an idea of what type of lady my mother-in-law is. She's the type of lady who commands respect, and if you don't give it to her, she'll throw a temper tantrum and ignore you for the rest of the week. She's a petty-minded person who always gets her way since no one has the energy to put up with her rants and her shows of dramatic pain and agony in the most minute situations. She's also the type of woman who could convince anyone to take her side, poison their minds against someone else. In short version, everyone in the family feared her and preferred to stay in her good books. Now, back to the story. We announced the name and it's just deafening with silence. Jagan's smiles fall as he clearly senses that his mother disapproves of the name. Before we have the time to register what is even happening next, she falls against a sofa, her hands on her forehead muttering, "We have forsaken the family's heritage." Jagan rushes towards his mother, as does every other aunt and uncle, as if more people giving her attention would make her feel better. I guess it sort of did though, because she sat up and looked us in the eye and said we were a disgrace for disowning our culture. Talk about being dramatic. It felt like I was living in an Indian teledrama. Of course, Jagan and I were perplexed, and we looked at each other before following her to her room, which was too big for her. She always wanted the best of everything. In my opinion, she was just a spoiled wife and daughter who was used to never taking no for an answer. That was until I came along. We stood in front of her like little children waiting to be reprimanded by the principal, and she didn't look me in her eyes even once. Instead, it felt as though I was not there at all. She addressed Jagan and said she thought it was an inappropriate name because it's too, quote, modern, and we need to change her child's name to something that would reflect our culture and heritage in it more. I don't know if it was her drama in the living room or because she was acting as though I didn't exist, but I lost it. I argued with her that this was our child and that we had every right to name her what we wanted. And so long as we taught Aria our culture, that was enough. Quote, "Then your child is not part of our culture." The fact that she even said this to my face about her grandchild beats me. The fact that our child is not part of our culture? Still, the anger I felt then led me to storm out of the room with Jagan following. We left her wretched house without greeting any of our relatives and drove home in silence. I think all that time in silence had fueled my anger and rage, and when we were finally alone in the room sipping on some tea, I asked Jagan what he thought. In my defense, I wanted to know if I was being dramatic and overreacting. After all, I just wanted to keep the peace in the family so that Aria would have a normal relationship with her extended family. Jagan said if we were talking about being dramatic, his mother was more dramatic than I had ever been. Given that Aria was our daughter, I told him his mother should win an Oscar for her performance in front of all our relatives. No, he did not take offense. He laughed his heart out. We didn't take notice of what my mother-in-law said and went about our day in the hopes that everyone would move on from this fiasco my mother-in-law created. But just like how all happiness and peace is short-lived, so was ours. I received a strongly worded message 3 days later when I was at home alone. You'd think that I would have taken matters into my own hands and handled it, but I didn't. As much as I wanted to sound like a hero in this story, I'm not. I was frightened that she would send someone over to my place and threaten me. I know it sounds awfully silly for me to think this way, but I assure you, you have no idea what my mother-in-law is capable of. Just so you know to what length that she'll go to get her way, here's a brief intermission from the story. My distant cousin was about to get married to a white guy because they fell in love. Love always wins. Or so they say. But with my mother-in-law, no, it doesn't work like that. She brought up the same story about culture and heritage and how she was, quote, polluting our family name with his white blood. She caused a ruckus the week before the wedding and they broke off the marriage. The part of that story that scared me the most was threatening messages that she sent from an unknown number straight to the guy that she was going to marry. And you want to know what makes everything worse? She laughed and told Jagan that she was the one who sent those messages. Now that you know to what lengths that she'll go to get her way, I will say my fear is justified. I called Jagan and he must have been busy at work because he said he would discuss it once he's back. Those few hours were the most agonizing hours of my life. I did not pick up any calls, did not open any messages. What if she hired someone to hack my phone? Well, she didn't, because once Jagan got home, he called his mother after he read the messages and told her to back off, that our daughter's name was our choice and ours alone. She pretended as though she didn't know what we were talking about and said I was making up things, that I was a delusional person. So, Jagan hung up and in a fit of rage, stormed out of our house just to get a fresh breath of air, leaving me alone with a crying baby in my hands. To say I'm mentally broken is an absolute understatement. All I could think was, why me? Jagan came back several hours later, drunk, and fell asleep right away. The only recurring thought I had was how one woman can mess up another family's life so much. How did she have so much power? Why did everyone give her so much power? She didn't deserve it. She only made a mess of everyone's lives except hers. The messages stopped and I thought it would be all over with, but no. Leave it to my mother-in-law to prolong an argument. That woman had some serious stamina. So, am I the a-hole for not wanting to change my baby's name after my mother-in-law's disapproval and causing this ongoing family drama? What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're enjoying your day so far. So we do have update number 1 to look at, and man, what a wild ride so far, and a serious overbearing mother-in-law. Today's story has 5 updates, so we're going to jump in the first one. If you're not subscribed to the story yet, make sure you smash that subscribe button, and let's get right into it. My mother-in-law has relentlessly tried to get us to change Aria's name. She had even gone the extra mile by sending me messages with a list of alternative names for our baby girl. She definitely had too much time on her hands. I ignored the messages, but I always kept Jagan in the loop, so he knew what was happening and would not suddenly take his mother's side. That was the last thing I wanted, losing my husband over such a petty drama. Do you know how Asian families need to keep every aunt and uncle updated about ongoing feuds? Well, my family was no different. Jagan and I had received several calls from aunties and uncles telling us to change the name, not to bring, quote, shame to the family. Can someone please explain to me how naming my child Aria, a perfectly normal name, is bringing shame to a family? Beats me. It's not like I named my child after a robot. Cue Elon Musk. Anyways, all they said was the name picked was not Indian enough, and that a name was always a way of telling a lot about a person. I don't exactly remember the last time I heard somebody's name and had an instant understanding of what the person's background was. We aren't all walking around with Iron Man's assistant Jarvis. Jagan told me to just politely nod my head and move on with life. That was how, well, he dealt with interfering aunts and uncles. So I did exactly that, hoping it would all stop and this nightmare would end. They all seem like robots, or rather duplicates of my mother-in-law. Replaying the same old messages, words unchanged, it felt as though I was listening to a one-recorded phone call. I get the importance of family history and culture. It's not that I don't. Please don't come at me with your explanations of family history and culture, because I've heard enough. But what I firmly believe is that my husband and I eventually have the final say in it. It's our child, after all. Tell me, when was the last time you consulted an entire village before naming your child? Never. I may seem petty for holding on to this matter for so long, and simply just not letting go. But all I ask for is the smallest grain of empathy. It's my child, who I carried for 9 whole months, and then birthed. Would that be the reason enough for me to pick the name for her? My mother-in-law clearly thinks that she has more rights over the children than I do. Otherwise, she would have dropped the issue a long time ago. Or was it her ego that stopped her from admitting defeat? I wouldn't know, but what I do know is I'm not going down without a fight. Jagan is backing me all the way up, and I just hope he continues to do so because his mother can be pretty influential in his thoughts. All she needs is one evening alone with him, and then I'm done for. Update number 2. Well, I'm guessing my mother-in-law spoke to Jagan over a call because he now seems torn between supporting me and appeasing to his mother. When was the last time an Asian man only supported his wife? I'm guessing the only reason he's torn between the two of us is that Arya is with me. A couple days ago, an aunt and uncle of Jagan's visit us to see the baby. Just so you know, they are pretty distantly related. So when I found out that they've heard about the drama, I wasn't really that surprised. Drama like this in the family tends to travel fast, and whose side do they always take? You guessed it, my mother-in-law's. The aunt had the audacity to tell me that I had to honor my mother-in-law's wishes, because she was the one who birthed my husband, and without my husband, I would never had a child. Excuse me, without me, my husband wouldn't have had a child. Who's keeping track? Not me. But just like there are enough relatives of ours who believe I should, quote, fulfill my mother-in-law's wishes, there are silent supporters of us. Don't judge me, but is it just me, or is it unfair that they remain silent supporters? Shouldn't everyone have the right to voice their opinion after all? I mean, we are in the land of dreams and possibilities, aren't we? The only issue is that my mother-in-law is too overbearing and crushes the very little freedom everyone in the family has. Oh, and before I forget to give you more context as to why my mother-in-law is a pain of a human being, she's the oldest of 8 siblings. I'm not saying when you're the oldest child it converts into you being able to call the shots. No. But the way my mother-in-law and her siblings operate, it sort of works out like that. My mother-in-law behaves as though she was born lucky, while the other siblings act as though they were lucky to be born. Talk about a dysfunctional family. When I saw Jagan's mother's family, I vowed then and there to never let my family end up like that. At least, I hope so. I'm not sure I'll continue with the updates, but I will definitely write if something else happens. Update number 3. Well, hey guys, it's been about a month since the fiasco went down, and the calls and texts from the extended family haven't stopped. Jagan is buckling under the pressure, and I'm writing this even though I had hoped all the drama would stop. Who am I kidding? With all this pressure burdening our small family, I've started to second guess our decision. Wouldn't it be easier if we just caved and let mother-in-law have her way? It would guarantee us peace of mind and a little bit more privacy in our lives. I did tell Jagan my thoughts of late, and he looked as though he wanted to wholeheartedly agree with me. But I saw that he stopped himself from doing so and quote said, "No, if we give in to her this time, she will always expect us to, and I can't live like that." This is the only reason that's stopping me from raising the white flag and admitting defeat. One reason I feel increasingly pressured to change Arya's name is family gatherings have become so strained and awkward. I'm not talking about only our immediate family, but even our extended family. Last weekend, we had dinner at our uncle's just because Asians always have dinners. We don't really need a reason to. I like that about our culture, but there's always a but with that. My mother-in-law has created a rift in the family. It makes dinners hardly enjoyable. It's only the wine and food that make it bearable. In my opinion, anyways, no one seems to want to talk to me, and if they do, it's only because they feel sorry I'm alone, and I can't stand a conversation I've had that was out of pity. It makes me feel so low and useless. But Jagan, on the other hand, isn't facing the pressure as much as I do. I guess it's to do with the way men operate. They either drink or talk about politics. Jagan said that a couple of older uncles had asked him and he had changed the subject with the upcoming elections. But that's not how women work. Women are so complicated and dramatic that they only make life hard for themselves. I know, I shouldn't be generalizing, but hey, I'm a woman. And I'm dealing with women, it's just tiring. The dinner that we've gone for was the most unbearable one that we've been to. My mother-in-law ignored me the whole time, and when I tried to approach her to greet her, she turned her face and walked away in a huff. Talk about being a middle school kid. If that wasn't embarrassing enough, no one spoke to me, and I sat alone in the corner of the room the whole night. At some point, I think the woman had gone into the kitchenette, and all I could hear was peals of laughter echoing through the hall. The men were outside in the garden at this time, and I sat there alone in the living room with a couple of kids glued to their devices. I would have paid so much money just to leave that place right then and there, but I had to suck it up. I guess another reason no one wants to risk being seen with me is that my mother-in-law can be absolutely ruthless. She'll just poison everyone's minds against good Samaritans who spoke at me for pity. The only silver lining to the dark cloud was Arya. When I told Jagan about the night and how awful it was, he just told me I was being dramatic. After a long night of being ostracized, hearing Jagan speak in his cruel ways was the least straw that I could handle. I broke down into tears when we got back home as I nursed Arya back to sleep. She was only my reason to go on, and all I'm hoping is that Jagan won't side with that woman. Calling her a woman is an insult to all women. She's lower than that. I'll keep you all updated. I think I might just cave in. It's begun to become too tiring for me. Update number 4. This was the last thing that I would do, but here I am writing this because I feel like a total failure. Have you ever tried something you thought would work but failed miserably? You would have, because what is life without pitfalls? Well, the pitfall I went through left me in a dark hole for a couple of days. Before I continue about my emotions and feelings, let me take you guys for a soap opera that I call Keeping Up with the Lagares. The Kardashians pale against my mother-in-law, trust me. I reached out to my mother-in-law with an olive branch, and guess what she did? Stepped on it and smashed it right in front of my face. Not literally, but more metaphorically. With all the drama and tension in the family, I only felt responsible for it all because it was my daughter and her name that we were fighting over. So,
I messaged my mother-in-law that I want to meet her in person at a cafe up the street. I told her I didn't have much time as Jagan had to work dinner, and he could keep Aria for only about an hour. I'm sure that it's normal for you to celebrate around your house when your mother-in-law replies to a text, because that's precisely what I did. Celebration aside, I rushed to get ready and headed over to the cafe. I ordered 2 cups of coffee and waited. Let me get one thing straight. I hate when people are late. Yeah, there's traffic, yeah, things come up, but I know my mother-in-law has nothing on her plate, given that she's a maid and a driver, and that's a lot in the US, unlike in Asian countries. Not only did she show up half an hour late, but from the onset of our meeting, she would never make eye contact with me. Our conversation consisted of sighs and frustrated noises. You'd think we were sitting opposite of an animal. No offense to my mother-in-law, but she can be very childish. Anyways, I start with how I miss having regular family reunions and get-togethers, and would love for Aria to get closer to her extended family, even her grandmother. She looked at me then, and when I tell you I felt victorious, I really did. Except everything went downhill really fast. At that moment, I knew I had her attention, so I told her how Jagan and I had thought about the name for so long, and the reason we picked it, because it meant melody. Isn't that such a pretty name? Well, my mother-in-law did not think so. This time she looked me in the eye, and I think it was only because we were in a cafe. She stopped herself from slapping me across the face. It was that very reason I chose a public cafe. She breaks out into how I don't know anything about her family history, her heritage, and culture, and that I ruin everything with my presence. Before I move on, you need to know a key detail in this whole fiasco. My mother-in-law has been referring to my daughter by the name Lakshmi. Yeah, she doesn't know her boundaries. Besides, I didn't have the energy to keep correcting her throughout the entire conversation, because this is what she told me. Deepika, you don't know anything. You've been living in a fool's paradise from day one, and if you just let me take control of things and run things the way they should in our family, then you wouldn't have gotten into this mess now, would you? This is all your fault and yours alone, and if you don't change your name to Lakshmi, may all the gods curse you and your wretched parents for bringing you a disobedient wife and daughter-in-law into my world. I'm sure my darling Jagan would not have agreed to this. Your magic and spells have my son in a trance. Well, I didn't know if the curse she laid upon my parents and myself or the magic part, because I completely lost it. I don't remember everything I said because I was so enraged. Yeah, that seems to be happening to me a lot. But what I do remember was standing up in a huff and telling her off before storming out of that cafe. I was glad the cafe wasn't too crowded since I was a regular, and the last thing I wanted was for the whole neighborhood to hear about my problems and judge me. So yeah, I did not reconcile with my mother-in-law. It only drove a bigger wedge between my family and her. Now, is this really a problem? Drop your comments down below, guys. Thank you so much for paying attention. I will update you when I know some more. Update number 5. Final update of the story. It's been a few months. Hey guys, it's been a few months since I've updated and met my mother-in-law at a cafe. It's been almost 2 since the whole fiasco, and it's gone down at the dinner. Jagan and I have no contact with my mother-in-law and the family except for a few aunts and uncles, and cousins who are secretive about their ties with us. I don't know if I'm a fool or not, but I'm beginning to second-guess our decision to stick to the name we picked for our daughter. Jagan rarely ever calls his mother, and when he does, it always ends up in an argument where he screams violently at her and then hangs up the phone. Just so you have some perspective of the relationship between Jagan and his mother before the whole drama, he was a mama's boy, the golden child, the one who would do anything for his mom, and she looked after him as though he was her only child even though he has 4 other siblings.
So, he's been in an awful mood lately. This whole fiasco is not only affecting our relationship with my mother-in-law and our extended family, but also between the two of us. Jagan has been supportive of me from the beginning, especially when it comes to standing up for what he wanted. Still, I don't think he had factored in being cut off by the family when he supported me because he passes these snide remarks occasionally. It's not that I'm holding him responsible. Still, it can be challenging to maintain my patience with him, knowing that he is completely angry with me, but rather with his mother. I've also started to think about Arya and her future, not knowing her grandmother. Every grandchild wants to meet their grandparents. What would I tell her? What would I tell her when she finds out that we don't move with half of our extended family? I know I'm overthinking it because when I voiced these concerns to Jagan, he said we'd cross those bridges when it came time. Ever so often, I think about, the lasting impact it would have on our family. And it just causes more stress for me, and I end up fighting with Jagan. I know there's no point of crying over spilt milk, but it's my family's future we're talking about. I spoke to Jagan about signing up for couples therapy, and he argued that we needed it with everything that's gone down. I know it's nothing to be ashamed of, but Jagan and I decide we would not speak about it to anyone. I think it's an Asian thing, and the stigma associated with therapy and mental health. Yeah, it's sad that life's become so gray and dark. To think one person could cause so much harm baffles my mind and all over such an insignificant matter. I just hope it works. After 2 sessions with the therapist, Jagan and I feel much better. Let me tell you this. If you have a problem, go speak to a professional. I'd felt low and dejected for so many weeks, blaming myself for this whole drama, when in reality, it wasn't my fault at all. I know you must be thinking, no crap, Sherlock. But the therapist said we had every right to name our child whatever we wanted, and we didn't have to feel guilty about it. I guess she's correct because I can see a change in Jagan too. He's been happier and less on edge about the whole drama with his mom. He does call her, he does talk to her, but Arya will never know her grandmother unless my mother-in-law decides to drop her ego and finally come visit her first grandchild. So, I have no regrets about sticking to my decision. Toxic, controlling people will always be toxic and controlling, irrespective of the relationship they ruin, and to be very honest, I'd rather have Arya stay away from a woman who would not bat an eye before cutting ties with her. Today's story seems to be another case of an overbearing mother-in-law, but this one might be the worst, because not only is she just popping in for visits every now and then, she's trying to change the entire dynamic of the relationship and how OP even relates to their family, dragging in aunts and uncles to take her side simply because she doesn't have a say in the naming of the child, which is none of her business really. But I would like to hear from you guys. Do you think that what is happening is 100% legit, and OP definitely gets the decision since it's her kid, not the mother-in-law? Or are you on the other side of the comment section, where you think the mother-in-law should have a say in the name? If you don't agree with each other, that's cool. Let's talk about it in the comment section down below. I decided to send my in-laws off to an old age retirement home. Yeah, might sound a little rough because we could have kept them at our house, but the thing is, they went against my decision and ultimately broke my trust. Well, when I told the news to my husband, he's saying I overstepped and should not have ever told his family to move away. Let me go back to the beginning and walk you guys through this wild ride. Okay, for context, my husband and I got married in 2011. We have a 10-year-old daughter who is at an age where she's becoming more aware of the world around her, and a 6-year-old son. Things at home were going well for us until the COVID pandemic hit. My husband used to run a diamond business, but we lost everything during the pandemic, which caused him great depression and acute stress, and had to step up the breadwinner of our family to be me. Although my husband's business had taken a hit, it was still enough to sustain us. As for me, my job as a lawyer gave me a steady income. My husband and I have a fairly solid relationship, except for every time his parents come into the picture. They're a close-knit family and have always been spending every single weekend together, traveling together, running errands together, etc. He often invites his parents out with us on date nights and parties on weekends. I don't really like my in-laws that much, to be honest. They tend to judge people a lot and will outright say something if they don't like it. For example, commenting on everything from my car needing to be washed to not liking my new hair color. Especially my mother-in-law. She's pure evil. And she has never been fond of our children. They've always been controlling, and it's caused so much friction between us. They've been lots of little things over the years that have shown how little they care about us. Especially me. I generally just try to keep my in-laws at a distance, because I respect that they're my husband's parents and he loves them. To clarify, he has had it out with them many times defending me. So here's where the issue starts. Around October of last year, I come home from work to find boxes and bags in the living room, and saw my in-laws talking with my husband. My husband pulled me aside and told me that his parents had spent all their money on their daughter, which is my husband's sister, who was entitled to receive their financial support. Now they're left with nothing and had nowhere else to go, as they are too old to go to work. So my husband decided to take them in. I was shocked, as there's obviously a huge Pandora's box of problems waiting if I let them in, but figured that it's not worth fighting over, especially when they're already here, so I just let it slide. We let them stay with us in our home 3-bedroom, and we gave them an allowance to help with expenses, and they moved in with us. It wasn't a small amount, but we wanted to help them out in their time of need, and we also wanted to make sure they were comfortable living with us. The allowance covered their basic expenses, such as meals, bills, and any other necessities they needed. We helped them with their medical bills and let them use our car. We also thought that they needed more than just financial support, and we had to find ways to make them feel like they're part of our family. We made sure to involve them in family activities and include them in decision-making, and provide them with emotional support even, something they didn't have from their daughter. Having them live with us was not making things any easier. But I managed at first, but after being quiet for only 6 months, my in-laws started criticizing me openly for everything. They hated that I was a lawyer, didn't respect my fashion sense at all, and were even raging about my cooking. They were always complaining about something, and they had a way of making feel like I wasn't doing enough for them. Well, they also treat our home like it's their own, since they've been putting away some old decoration on the excuse that it looks too tacky, before putting up their own taste of decor. If I listed every passive-aggressive thing they said or did to us and the kids during their stay, it would make this post so infinitely long. Soon I started noticing something, though, that they seemed a bit off lately, but I figured it was just being in their own heads or something. That is, until I freaking found something this weekend that I never expected at my doorstep. A paternity test result. But not just any paternity test result. Mind you this. A paternity test that was performed on my own children, without our consent, and oh boy, that was the final straw for me. Not only did my in-laws humiliate me for months and then order a paternity test, but they also didn't even have the decency to inform us after taking the test, or at least after they literally sent over the report to me. Didn't they know the level of betrayal that their own son and daughter-in-law must have felt? To say that I felt betrayed is an understatement. We had always provided them with financial support and a place to stay. And this is how they're going to repay us? By stealing our genetic materials? Going behind my and my partner's back and doing a DNA test, huh? To be honest, it actually wasn't just the paternity test or the act of stealing itself, but the fact that they've been questioning the paternity of our children. How could they even think that our kids aren't ours? Normally, I'd let my husband handle issues like this, but he was in another city due to some work. I was speechless for a moment, and before I blew up from anger, I confronted them about these things. But they claimed that their motives were good when they felt that our son looks nothing like me, and that they want only the best for us and for our children. This goody-goody attitude was what pushed me. Even if they didn't apologize, I wouldn't have bothered. But when they started trying to justify their racist fears, I knew that I had to take drastic action to protect my family, even if it was a very difficult decision. I felt like I had no choice but to immediately cut off their allowance and send them packing. It was time I stopped biting my tongue and finally stand up for myself. So I reluctantly did. And we had the mother of all arguments. I asked them to better leave our home before I lose whatever respect I have left for them. I let her know what I thought of her and the type of mother she is to her son. It's obvious that they did not go over well, but I said some very harsh things. True, yeah, but harsh. Well, I think it was well deserved, but I'm wondering if I shouldn't have just, bit my tongue. Like I've been for years trying to keep the peace, because right after I talked, my mother-in-law's exact words were this: "I can't have my boy raising kids that aren't his." Well, this really upset me, but I kept my cool, and I've had enough of their behavior, and it was time for them to go. They seemed taken aback by my boldness, but I wasn't going to back down. They even demanded that they needed the fine china that's displayed in the dining room for selling it, because they don't have any money. Those fine china are my family heirlooms that my grandmother got from her mother, and I treasure them, so obviously I said, no. My father-in-law, he's even worse. He said a few choice words, which angered me more. I didn't even hear the rest because I went to my room and immediately called the police. They arrived after an hour and finally took charge of the situation since nobody else could. As soon as they walked in, my in-laws tried to put on a show of innocence, but I wasn't having it. I explained to the cops what happened, and they quickly saw through my in-laws' lies. My father-in-law continued to argue with the police, but they didn't budge. They informed my in-laws that they were no longer welcome in our home, and that they had to leave immediately. So they escorted my in-laws and their belongings out of our home, and back to the old age house they were previously residing in, which is in the same city, by the way. Although they hated it there, I couldn't bring myself to even care. As I watched my in-laws being escorted out of our home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. My husband has no idea of what his parents have done, and I didn't tell him about the whole DNA test and thing, not until after his return in 2 days. Looking at his face, I knew that it broke his heart. I know how much he tried to win his parents' approval, and what they did was like a slap across the face. I felt very bad. I also told him that I asked them to leave the house. Well, he wanted to immediately visit them at the old age home, so we went there. At that point, my in-laws absolutely start bawling, crying their eyes out. They were obviously trying to manipulate him. I had seen it happen before, and I knew that they were experts at playing the victim and using emotional tactics to get whatever they wanted. I took a deep breath. I tried to explain to my husband why he had taken a firm stance against his parents and why we have to do it. I reminded him of the violation of our privacy, and that we could not bring ourselves to trust them again for what they've done this time. But still, my husband seemed torn. He still loves them, he says, and wants to maintain a relationship with them and didn't want to hurt them. But he also loved our children and didn't want to put them at risk. Well, yeah, you could say it was a difficult position to be in. I know, and I could see the weight of it all bearing down on him. I couldn't help but feel guilty for putting my husband into this position. But then I thought of our children and how they deserve to have their privacy respected. I'm also tired of having to deal with the stress from my high-end job and at home. And I knew that I've made the right decision even if it was a difficult one. After the visit, he's now mad at me, mad that I made an extreme decision. I can understand why my husband would feel conflicted, but I just can't overlook the fact that his parents violated our trust in such a personal way. He thought I was overreacting and didn't even give them the time to pack their stuff and leave, but I felt like it was the only way to protect our family's dignity. I mean, I get it. It's his parents, but at the same time, I feel like he's not seeing things from my perspective. He's discussed the issues with his sister that night, and I don't know the details. I don't really know what to think about that. I just hope she doesn't take their side, because if she does, it's only going to cause more problems for our family. If she takes their side, it could lead to an absolute gigantic rift caught between her and my husband, as well as between our families, and I just want this situation to be resolved as peacefully as possible, without any more drama to unfold. But I know that might be wishful thinking at this point. Now they all, including my husband, are upset with me. Yeah, all these just make me feel like I'm the bad guy. I couldn't shake that feeling of guilt and doubt. Was I overreacting as my husband feels? These thoughts haunt me, and I couldn't help but second-guess myself. I mean, on one hand, I know that what they did was absolutely unforgivable and horrible. I couldn't just let it slide and pretend everything was hunky-dory. But on the other hand, I mean, yeah, they're still family, and I couldn't help but feel like I've betrayed my husband by severing ties with his own parents. The guilt was eating me up inside, and I wonder if there was a better way to handle the situation. Was it really necessary to involve the police? The worst part is that I don't even know how to move forward from this. What's more, the issue even caused a rift between me and my husband. I'm devastated. Please, any support and advice in the comment section is so helpful. Update number 1. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you to everyone who sent me kind words and encouragement, even the private messages. You have no idea how much it means to me right now. Also, recently someone commented on my OG post asking what happened with my husband, and a few even suggested marriage counseling. We've not been to marriage counseling since before we got married. I've been begging him to go, but he's being very cagey, keeps canceling or avoiding it. I welcome marriage counseling recommendations. He says he needs space to process and doesn't know if he'll be able to forgive me. I didn't realize what the fallout from my decision will be for his family in the long run, but I do know that I couldn't stand by and let my in-laws treat us like that. Still, I've apologized in, well, every single way that I know how to. At this point, I just have to give him the space he wants and hope he calms down. It would be horrible for us to throw away what we built. I hope that he understands why I did what I did. The good part is, he seems to be open to seeking couples counseling. It gives me some hope that we can work past this. Some of you suggested taking legal action against my in-laws for stealing our genetic material and doing the DNA test without our consent on our children. Being a top lawyer, I'll definitely win the case, and my in-laws will have to pay a very hefty fine for their actions, but I don't want that. My relationship with my in-laws is all but shattered, and I'm not sure it'll ever be repaired. It'll cost a lot to pay for another house, since we're already paying a huge rent for our current home, so I offered to change to a more comfortable old age home. But my in-laws simply refused. Today, I got a grocery subscription to be sent to their old age home every single week. That would be enough to cook various meals. Not sure what their reaction will be. My husband told me that they tried to contact their daughter, just for help. But she's been ignoring their calls as she knows what they've done to her brother. Anyways, that's where things stand for now. I'll keep you guys updated if anything changes. Thanks again for your time. Update number 2. Well, guys, I'm sorry. This is not the happiest update, but not the worst either. It's also incomplete, but enough people have asked me for an update, and I figured I owed you guys. So, 6 days ago, my daughter came up to me and asked me what was happening with her grandparents. Seemed like she had overheard the entire argument. I sat her down and explained the situation as best as I could. I told her that her grandparents have done something very wrong, and that we cannot let them stay with us anymore. She didn't fully understand the situation, but I could tell that she was upset and confused. My son was still far too young to understand what was happening, so he continued with his Call of Duty games peacefully. In the following days, my daughter's behavior changed. She was quieter than usual and seemed to be lost in thought. She also started to act out and was getting in trouble at school. I knew that something was bothering her, but I didn't know how to approach the topic. It wasn't until she came to me one day and asked if we were going to get a divorce that I realized how much the situation had affected her. See, I was shocked and told her that her father and I loved each other very much, and that we were not going to get a divorce. I then asked her why, and she told me that she's heard our grandparents talking about how the situation would definitely ruin the marriage. They've been filling her head with nonsense lies and had been trying to turn her against us. I was steaming, but I didn't want to make the situation worse by confronting them again, and my daughter eventually started to open up about how she was feeling. We had long talks about trust, honesty, and even family. I then decided that even if my in-laws apologized, they've overstepped a gigantic, huge boundary, and I would never be able to trust them with my children again. And if that were to happen, it's definitely a series of conversations first. The kids' paternity test was low-hanging fruits of what would have gotten the most dramatic results. But now they don't have that card anymore, and I think they're desperate to find something new. I have a feeling that they'll be back in a month with all sorts of cover-ups and platitudes. They will even be more hell-bent on making my life miserable by kicking them out. A few days later, update number 3. Messy. A messy update I have for you, but I'll keep it short and sweet. After listening to the comments and talking to my husband, he's finally agreed to meet up earlier today. Though a few people were telling me to break up with him, we talked over coffee for a few hours, and what most of you suggested was true. His real reason for not wanting to kick them out of the house is that he felt guilty, and also responsible for their situation. Also, based on some of the advice I'm receiving, I see a lot of you are concerned that I'm not going to be able to handle his toxic parents again. You don't have to worry. We've started going for family counseling, and my husband began to see things from my perspective and realized that his parents had to be distanced. I even showed him some of this thread comments, especially one that said, "Hey, you dodged a massive disapproving bullet by cutting them out." He smiled immediately. It just looked like he was processing everything, and I can understand that it took him a couple of weeks. We're both now dealing with the emotional fallout of putting up with the garbage. Also, he told me that he's planned a family dinner in a few weeks in order to sort this problem once and for all. I don't know how it's gonna go, but I think I needed this. I need some sort of closure. But at the same time, I'm afraid to confront his parents all over again and address the issues that's caused the tension in our relationship in the first place. I told the same to my husband. He assured me that if things still don't work out, we will decide to move forward as a family without the presence of his toxic parents. Looking back on everything, I realized that sometimes the hardest decisions are the right ones. Cutting off my in-laws was not easy, but I knew that I had to show our children that we value ourselves and our families enough to stand up against this behavior, even if it comes from family members, and that's exactly what I did. I also feel happy that my husband came out of his guilt and understood me. We now have each other, and that's enough. As we wait for the dinner date, I'll try to focus on the present and move forward as a family. Update number 4. Final update posted by OP. Hey guys, so last month I've made an update about how I got back together with my husband. Yay. And about the family dinner. I did end up joining the conversation, and I'm glad. I'm glad that my husband and my in-laws have now arrived at a common ground. Ish. Let me tell you what happened. Things really blew up after my last update. There were multiple conversations between my husband and both his sister and their parents. It did not go well at first when they tried to justify their actions all over again. But I wasn't willing to let them off the hook that easily. I reminded them that what they did was, well, a clear violation of our trust. Right after that, my husband got really mad at his parents and said, "Do you both think that a secret paternity test is not a big deal? Aren't you realizing that you've committed a crime? A crime by ordering a DNA test without the parents' permission. You have no right to question the paternity of our children, Mom and Dad." I don't know why, but him telling them it's wrong has worked. They both began to apologize, and they finally acknowledged that they were wrong to take advantage of our hospitality. What took them so long is the only question I'm wondering. Well, despite the apology, I still feel hurt by their actions. By the way, they never apologized for humiliating me every single day, but I was willing to make the most of the situation and work on rebuilding our relationship. Anyways, our family is finally able to move past this difficult chapter in our life. We're slowly starting to recover from the setback. My husband's even planning to restart his business in the diamond company, and I continue to work hard as a lawyer. We also make sure to spend quality time with our children. We started doing more family activities like movie nights and game nights, and we continue to have open and honest communication with our kids about what happened with their grandparents. Still, we try to keep them shielded from the tension between us and my in-laws, but it's not always easy. Yesterday, we discussed the possibility of moving to a new city just to start fresh. But we haven't made any concrete plans yet. Nothing set in stone. For now, we take things one day at a time and hope that things will get better. There isn't much else to say, other than thank you. You guys have given us such an enormous amount of love and support. People were sending dozens of heartfelt messages. I even had to turn my phone off because of all the notifications chiming in. What a distraction to work. I wanted to let you all know your kind words meant so much to me. Even if I felt a little too awkward to respond to most of the messages, it's a strange and difficult time all around for us and for our children. But we'll try to navigate it as best as we can. That's all, I suppose. Thank you for your time. Okay, so this question has to make me ask you this. What do you think about the in-laws going behind OP's family's back and doing these tests to the young children without any consent from the family?
I would love to hear from you guys about what exactly you would do in this scenario. I know it's a really weird one, but maybe one of you viewers out there have been through something similar, where maybe an in-law or a parent went against your decision with something to do with your children. Go ahead and post your best stories that you have in the comment section down below. Little did I know, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law would absolutely turn against me and do something that would stab me in the back and make me want to forget them for the rest of my life. But I will get my revenge. Pregnancy is a huge deal. It always is. Each one has its own conditions and complications, and that's why it should not be taken lightly. I've always been broad-framed, but without falling into the definition of fat. And when my husband and I got pregnant, well, there wasn't a noticeable change. In fact, I managed to go unnoticed for several months, without people noticing how my belly grew a few extra inches each time. I even laughed out loud when one of my coworkers told me I was a little chubbier, and everyone felt uncomfortable. I confess that's because I was pregnant, and everyone was stunned because they have not even taken into an account. Otherwise, it was as the book says: discomfort, dizziness, nausea, a hormone imbalance, trips to the bathroom every 5 minutes, and thinking it twice before going downstairs. For several months, we had to make an improvised resting space near the living room, just so I could sleep more comfortably. At some point, of which I'm not very proud, I even went so far as to insult my husband, who did nothing but laugh about it. Of course, it was a very comical situation, although I sounded very serious by then. He puts up with me far too much, and I'm grateful to be with someone like him who knows how to keep things to light. He can be a bit carefree at times, but it's better than being a bundle of nerves. In a couple of weeks, we'll have a new addition to the family, and I couldn't be more excited about it, to be honest. Sure, it's a little scary with the whole delivery thing, but it's a one-day thing and that's it. We already have the hospital and even the room. It's an expensive place, but nothing is ever enough to bring this baby into the world safely. During the delivery, we were helped by mother-in-law and sister-in-law, with whom I got along very well with. Actually, they even spoiled me a lot during the whole pregnancy, and even my husband had to scold his sisters, because, well, he said she was spoiling me by indulging me with every whim. I never really had a sister, and it's nice to see how she cares so much for me. Almost like she's the one who's going to raise the baby. She even planned the baby shower a couple months ago, and I didn't think that could have been so spectacular. The gender reveal, it was quite comical. It was done through a game where each guest had to line up to form a word, and the initials of the word ended up, unbeknownst to my husband and me, in our baby's male name. Thus we knew we were having a baby boy. Tears came out of me like never before, and I even thought I was going to dehydrate. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had in my life, and I felt like part of a family without having started with my part first. I talked to my friends about childbirth, and they all gave me different answers, and I quote, "That's the worst pain you'll ever experience in your life." Or, "It's no big deal, kidney stones hurt more." I don't know, I don't remember, I was in the middle of anesthesia heaven. Try to go to the bathroom before so you don't deliver just the baby and leave another gift. And I admit that all this made me panic because I don't know what I'm going to face. I write all of this as a venting log for, well, the before and after the experience as an aid to new mothers from a sincere and honest perspective. It'll be just one more opinion in the sea of experiences that can be found, but that's what it's all about, to be a support. We've already bought everything to make it as comfortable as possible, but I can't help but get teary-eyed when I walk into the baby's room and see the empty crib. Soon enough, with a little creature in there, resting peacefully. I've been having a feeling that's hard to describe.
I feel it would be the maternity instinct we all have of protection and affection before we even know what it's like what my little baby boy will look like. Who, by the way, will be named Jonathan, after my father, Jonathan Alexander. A pretty powerful name for a baby, don't you think? Last night, well, I had a rather ugly dream, where I was old and I saw my son going off to college, leaving the roof of his own house. I know, I may sound a little crazy. I don't have my baby in my arms and I'm already thinking about when he's going to leave the nest. I put it down to the same maternal sense that's born in me after all this I'm going through. I woke up today with tears in my eyes, believing that little Johnny would no longer be with me. My husband says I even woke up squeezing the pillow, almost to the point of pulling the stuffing out of it. Even when all this is over, it'll be years. Many days before I even have to leave my son in kindergarten. But this maternal spirit makes me feel weak, and I want to have him as if he were a necklace wrapped around my neck. That's it, I must stop. I'll be writing about the process after I'm done, and I'll reread all this in the future to feel a little ridiculous, and even show it to my son as proof of how much his mother loved him since before he was even born. I hope you won't be ashamed of it. What's up, guys? Mr. Reddito here. So this story today was written in diary format. It looks like we have about 6 updates. So let's go ahead and hop into update number 1. I hope you guys are having a great day. If you're not subscribed to the channel and you want daily videos, make sure you smash that subscribe button. And here is update number 1. Well, I've decided to do this little update while I'm sedated in the hospital gurney. I warn that it's my husband who's writing all this while I'm in the clouds. And he promised me that he would write it all down no matter how ridiculous it may sound. Okay, I'll try to sound as serious as I can, but this anesthesia thing is out of this world. I had to take all of it to mitigate the pain, which, let me tell ya, was worse than I thought. Don't get me wrong, wasn't that all pregnancies are like this? I mean, gosh, I'm so messed up on drugs right now. If you knew the sea of tears I was doing during the whole event, you would not have recognized me. They tell me I was red, to the point where I was almost going to burst a vein or pop my eye out. Turns out my body has a condition that makes my crotch smaller than normal. So they had to do some cutting so they could get to the baby. Who, by the way, came out as a big-headed, handsome boy just like his father. But it was not an easy task, au contraire. I felt for an eternal 30 minutes that I was going to fate at any moment. And I even got to the point where I wished that would happen because the pain was so bad that I wanted the doctors just to take the baby out of me. Being part of the process was so hard. It was as if I were an ice cream machine that's just pressing a lever. I could pull everything out, but I repeat, it was a personal process. And it's not necessarily going to happen to you. Yeah, it was horrible, but at least I have the consolation that the doctors told me that, in case of a new pregnancy, now the baby would come out better thanks to the cuts they made. But I told them all at once that after that experience, the best thing to do was just to hold on for a few years before even considering having a new baby. So, I asked for all kinds of anesthetics, and it took a while for them to take effect, I will admit. Although I was finally able to do it. There was a lot of blood, and my husband got watery, but I had to be brave for the both of us and, well, go on with my work. He's laughing as he writes this, but it is comical, because despite all the pain and martyrdom in the end, I can smile at the thought that everything went smooth. When I got to see my little Johnny, my maternal instincts almost made me scold him for having caused me such pain, but I was soon overcome by the affection of love, and finally having him here in front of me. I admit that my memory is a little blurry. After all the pain, I barely remember him as a gray spot between my arms. And thank goodness, my husband was recording the whole thing. Because if not, I swear I would have no memory of holding him at all. But this only lasted a few moments because the nurse immediately took him away to put him on a separate stretcher. Well, at that moment, I just wanted to scream at the nurse to give him back to me for just a moment longer, but I was so weak, I could barely keep my eyes open. The last thing that I remember loudly was that everyone was telling me not to close my eyes, otherwise it would be worse. Well, we'll have to continue this conversation later since I feel Morpheus knocking on my door. I feel like sleeping for at least 2 whole weeks. But I don't want to miss a second of seeing my Johnny boy. The only thing keeping me going is being able to hold him in my arms once again. And I made this little text just before, during, and after the birth experience as a last piece of advice. Make sure to check your body as much as you can. I went to the gynecologist, but this last problem could have been avoided if I had been a little more careful days before the birth. So it's better to be safe than sorry once again. Update number 2. I feel like I'm going to pass out, but not before I throw up everything I've eaten for the last 9 months. Well, Johnny's gone. He's gone. He's gone. He's missing, and I'm almost dying trying to take it all in. I mean, the hospital staff doesn't know where he is. They vanished. Absolutely no trace of him from his room. How could a baby be lost just in a hospital? I had heard rumors of degenerates kidnapping. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time writing this as my nerves are shaking my hand. My husband has been screaming back and forth, showing our frustration, and an investigation's underway to find out what happened. Because not everyone is given access to the maternity ward. Only family members and 1 or 2 people have completed the registry. A registry that, according to them, is a maximum security to exactly avoid scenarios like this. However, we still have a latent mystery, and this involves everyone, so we've called my parents and my husband's mother. My sister-in-law went on a trip yesterday, and I'm sure she would also be outraged by what happened. If my boyfriend yells at the hospital staff, my sister-in-law would reach for a scalpel and threaten anyone who stands in front of her. We're analyzing security cameras, and they're afraid that I might get too upset, because stress is the last thing that I need right now. Apparently, the cameras show a person entering the ward, a nurse, but she's on break during the day, so we'll try to get in touch with her as soon as possible. May the weight of God's wrath fall upon the person who dares take my baby from me. Update number 3. They say that betrayals never come from the enemy, and this looks like a TV investigation case. Do you know who has my baby? My sister-in-law. It's probably several cities away right now, and it's only been 2 days. I feel like I've lived a lifetime of terrors. I can't sleep at night, and I have dark circles under my eyes the size of a cereal bowl, thinking about everything my baby could have been going through. Gosh, no one in the world's ever had a situation like this happen to them, or at least fewer people than I think. It's the worst feeling of all, and to think it's who claimed to be my friend and family. I'll explain the matter a little more, but I just want to get it off my chest. It turns out that this lady, whom I used to call my mother-in-law, asked one of the nurses to come see the baby, and that she had, quote, been sent to pick him up to see an anomaly that the infant had, and that it needed to be confirmed as soon as possible. The nurse, in her innocence, gave the baby to the lady, who had planned everything from the beginning. Well, that's right. It had all been planned to kidnap little Johnny, and I don't know if I can or should comment on this. The lady, who doesn't even deserve to be called mother, took the baby and gave him to her daughter, who had pretended to go on a trip so as not to arouse suspicion. She didn't count on the nurse revealing her identity, and now she's crying and playing the victim, saying that her daughter manipulated her just to give up the baby. It turns out that my sister-in-law has had a murky history regarding motherhood. I didn't know whether to write it down before, as it's a touchy subject. on her part, but at this point I don't mind in the least. She's had 3 miscarriages already, one of which was the 8th month, and it frustrated her so much that she even had to go to a psychiatrist to be medicated. I met her during her last pregnancy, which did not even last 6 months, and I could see how desperate she was about the loss. We were with her throughout the grieving process and, well, subsequent visits to the psychologist, who told her that it was best to abstain for a while from having a baby. I even felt that my maternal instinct was derived from her experience, her losses, and not being able to be a mother. But now that she had the opportunity to steal my happiness, she took it. She said she was going on a trip to Oregon, but at this point, we don't know if she was telling the truth. So, a full police alert was sent out, but that was a long time ago, and we don't know where she might be. My husband's mother has been questioned, well, numerous times, but she says she doesn't know where her daughter went either. A new mother should not be going through this. Somehow, I feel a bond with my baby, and while I want to believe he's safe and sound, anything's possible. I don't think she would hurt him, as she understands what a loss is, and my husband has made me understand that the worst thing she can do is keep him for herself. But we don't accept that either. I don't accept anything that's happening. The police have cordoned off several roads and the toll booths. They've been particularly vigilant in case they see my sister-in-law passing the border area. My husband was absolutely furious. All that pent-up anger I have, he let it show, cursing his own sister and by extension his mother for lending herself to it. I get nauseous just thinking about how all the help we received was just an alibi for such a diabolical plan. We tried calling the contact number, but nobody would pick up. On one occasion, a call was answered, and they tried to trace it, but we were unable to do so again. We believe she removed the chip from her phone, and if so, she could be anywhere in the world without us knowing. I'm walking around with a loss of appetite, and in my condition, that's terrible. I pass the time while I delete the pictures I've sent on my phone, well, where those women appear next to me. Without thinking about all the damage that they planned, I can't stand looking at them. It's outrageous, everything that's happening. And if necessary, it'll happen what I least want to happen. To take this case to social networks and ask for help from the collective. I'm not a person who likes to draw attention, and I'm terribly shy. But a desperate mother would be willing to do this and much more. Believe me. Update number 4. 3 days. It's been 3 days, and I can't stand the despair anymore. They thought they detected my husband's sister on the road to Washington. Washington, right? On the other side of the country. At this point, I don't know what to believe. The thought that I was only with Johnny for a few seconds and remembering him as a little gray blob in my arms cannot be the only memory I have of him. If this keeps up, I'll end up just as crazy as my ex-sister-in-law. They tell me I can walk out of the hospital now, but no matter how hard I try to use my legs, it's hard to get the motivation to get from point A to point B. When I walk the corridors to get home, I feel like everything I'm going through is a nightmare. The neighbors, they don't greet me. Maybe they already know about it and don't do it out of respect, and if so, how many others know? Imagine Johnny not being able to drink his milk, and if he were to use or drink his auntie's, it would be the first milk he's ever had in his life. I don't know if that'll affect him along with the stress issue. A baby tends to form his personality in his first days of life as well, as I understand it, and under that chaos, I don't want to imagine my little one suffering from such an event. I check the news on the internet every single moment, and refresh the news portal page every 5 seconds, hoping for a positive note. The police have investigated everything about this woman. Work, home, relationships, but nothing fits. Every place she could have possibly been is ruled out. As we ask everyone who she knows, but they're all just perplexed as we are. We went so far as to talk to her psychiatrist, who was surprised by it all, to be honest. She cut her sessions a few months ago since she was in a more, quote, stable condition. She had even stopped her antidepressant medication, and even with the excitement of my pregnancy, she felt a new hope in her nephew to come. And that's when I connected the dots. She planned this from the beginning, just to take care of the pampering of me, so the baby would come out healthy so she could keep him. My blood absolutely is at a point where it should be boiling, and the worst thing is that I can't do anything about it. I just have to wait. Update number 5. A desperate mother is capable of anything, and even I was surprised at what I did. A few days ago, I was sleeping, something not very common at this point, and I received a call. It was my husband, who apparently was not next to me in bed, which surprised me. He just said, "They called her." And I felt as if something fell on my brain, as if my soul came back into my body and all the problems of the world were solved. During that whole period, I was looking at websites that could help me with the pain, and I even, well, although I'm not very proud of it, went to a website where they talked about mother's grief, about how to deal with the loss of a baby, even without having met him or her. It's a bit murky, and I don't want to go into details that I wasn't really aware of, but when I got that call, I felt that everything would finally be in order. It had been 3 days since I'd left the hospital, a week without my newborn baby, without my Johnny. Apparently, she had managed to come up with a rather elaborate plan, involving fake IDs and even an adulterated birth certificate. Well, pointing her out as the baby's real mother. They managed to apprehend her only by mere chance because a passerby had recognized her at a gas station, from a brief news item that he'd seen in the newspaper. I am told that it was like a car chase, something that made my blood run cold, since upon realizing her identity at the gas station, the woman drove at full speed, risking the life of the baby. She was stopped precisely for speeding, and when they noticed the baby covered in sheets in the back of the vehicle, they had to stop her. She even resisted the arrest, saying things like, my baby, let go of me, he's my son." And that made me even more upset. When she was brought back to our state, she was taken to the nearest police station, where my husband and I would be waiting. When we saw her, emaciated with her makeup smeared and her hair had gone, I couldn't help but feel a blind rage. I got up, despite having just left the hospital a few days ago, walked up to her, and I slapped her right across the face with my left hand. I don't know what surprised me more, the fact that no one did anything to stop me, not even the guards holding her, or the mind, well, was quick enough to react and realize that there was the hand of my engagement ring, which scratched her cheek, making her bleed. Of course, by then not only did I not realize it, but I started yelling profanities and curses at her. My husband tells me that he was even afraid to pull me away from her. Everything was chaotic and out of control at the station, and after I calmed down, the rest could go on. I don't remember very well the details of what happened at the time, as I was more concerned about my baby than about revenge. I was told that the infant was being brought in as soon as possible, as he was having a medical checkup, and my husband and I said we didn't mind going as far as it took to see Johnny again. The officers apologized, insisted that they were, well, best to wait here for the time being. They also asked if we were going to press charges, and I think that was the quickest yes I've ever said in my life. I was so blinded by hate that the only thing that could get me out of that position was my little Johnny. After 2 hours that felt like an eternity, an officer arrived with a bundle in her arms. Never in my holy life and I ever had felt such happiness. I held my baby almost immediately and saw his little face and eyes closed, sleeping peacefully. During the exchange of arms, he woke up and cried, and the sound of his lungs working was music to my ears. Even though I thought I had no more tears to release, I still cried and lay down on the floor with Johnny in my arms. My husband did the same and stroked his forehead in the most tender way possible. It was a tear-jerking scene at the police station that day. I felt fulfilled. After such a complicated pregnancy, I could finally have my reward, and I felt that I would never let that child leave my arms ever again. I don't know if I'll ever write here again, as this experience has exhausted my artistic fiber or something. All I want to do is take a deep breath, let my mind go blank, and rest. There's a lot to do, and Johnny's adjusting to his house. A home that's been waiting for him for a long time. Update number 6. Final update. The aftermath. Reading this again feels unreal. My husband even told me not to come back to these updates as it'll be reliving bitter memories. However, I feel it's something I have to finally do to turn the page and heal from all the wounds of the past. So, I will write one last update. After all that happened, quite delicate judicial processes began that, to be honest, did not let me fully enjoy the first weeks with Johnny. Even if everyone was focused on him resting, but as they say, justice doesn't sleep. We took my ex-sister-in-law to court, where even her mother, my ex-mother-in-law, would also have to bear the brunt of the law, as we never believed her story of manipulation by daughter. It hurt my husband quite a bit to see his closest ones in such conditions, but it had been an unforgivable crime, and years of family ties could be lost in a heartbeat. I say ex-sister-in-law and ex-mother-in-law in the sense that I no longer want to have anything to do with them, as my relationship with my husband's going to be better than ever. The verdict of the trial was that my ex-mother-in-law had to pay bail. A soft bail, if you ask me. On the other hand, for the crime of child abduction, my ex-sister-in-law would have to spend up to 5 years in jail. But due to her unstable mental state, much of her actions were blamed on the fact that she needs help. So, she went to a psychological rehabilitation clinic, with a stay, in case of good behavior, of up to 3 years. And she even wanted to countersue me for physical abuse on my part, due to the slap that cut her face. But my lawyer, to whom I owe my absolute soul, argued that this had been a purely passionate move, which was kept with the situation I was experiencing at the time. In that way, I was able to have a slight payback and retaliation towards her, who was more than angry at having to spend so much time in exile. She's someone who went by appearances, and I know that being in a position like that consumes her. Because we know that people will talk, call her crazy, which she is, and she'll get the justice that neither I nor the system will be able to offer. Deep down, I want to feel bad for her. It's not easy to lose a child, and she lost 3. But her actions weren't the right ones, and now she's paying the consequences dearly for it. Although, I now attend the psychologist, he tells me that I should be slightly more empathetic to her situation. I wondered if I were in the same position, would I have done the same thing? I don't know. But after the angry outburst I had, I knew that a mother would be willing to do anything for her baby. Now, I understand the motherhood documentaries on Animal Planet better. Resentment can lead to stress, which would make my life miserable, and I don't have time for that, because now I have someone to protect and give him all the comforts I can. As for little Johnny, it can't get any better because he's not made of gold. He's had an average weight when he was born, and after all the stress, he had trouble eating. But once it was all said and done, he was able to drink his milk regularly. He even gained a little weight, but my husband learned something hilarious, a little baby exercise. And he makes a lot of faces and sounds as they play, with Johnny just laughing until he almost chokes. He's currently almost a year old, and this is one of the main reasons I decided to take this up again. It was perhaps the most intense experience of my life, and every day When I look into my son's eyes, laughing, crying after pooping his diaper, or making messes while eating, I can't help but imagine him away from me. I imagine the scariest scenario where they would not have been able to find him and that woman would have gotten away with it. Without Johnny, who might grow up under another name, knowing that his real parents were a lifetime away, tirelessly searching for him. Sometimes I end up crying in front of the baby, and I have to wipe the tears away fast because then he'll start crying. Even though he's not even a year old, he's very empathetic, and that's the quality I love about him. I can tell he's going to be an amazing person when he grows up, and I'll be with him every step of the way. To all those new moms out there, I wish you all the best, and may you never ever happen to a situation like this. I keep having nightmares about childbirth, not so much because of the pain, but because of the reoccurring dream that as Johnny leaves me, he's passed into a room never to be seen again. That kind of thing takes time to heal, but as my psychologist told me, and I quote, "It's only now that the enjoyment will begin." And I couldn't be happier about it. If you ask me about having more children, the answer's a maybe, in the distant future, when Johnny can walk, talk, and read, and maybe help with his new baby brother or sister at home. After all, our family's just getting started.
This is just one of those stories that must have happened in a separate country from the United States, because it's just not that easy to get a baby out of the maternity ward. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this story? It was absolutely a wild ride. I would like to hear from your exact points about maybe what you would do in this situation, how this could have been prevented. Just drop it all in the comment section. I have the worst mother-in-law. She's telling me to divorce her son because apparently he's rich. But what she doesn't know is I make twice as much as he does.
I've heard several ladies like me say that they would never get married to a man whose mother was still alive. And I get that their reason is because they're scared of having a mother-in-law who would turn out to be a thorn in their flesh. The notion is still really stupid to me, but these ladies have mothers and they too would become mothers someday. How would they react to another lady wishing them death just so they could marry their son? For one, I have a mother who anybody who would be lucky to have as a mother-in-law. She's easygoing, but make no mistake, she was a principled woman. My father passed away on a few years after I graduated from college, and he left us quite some money. But my mother made it clear to me that I had to forge a path for myself, and not depend on the wealth which my father had left behind. Quote, "You chart your own course properly, so you would have something to leave behind for your children once you're gone," she would always say. Though we had money, and I mean money, my mother made sure we never attracted attention to ourselves through a loud lifestyle or extravagant stuff. No, on the contrary, she made sure my younger brother and I lived life as simple as possible. According to her, the fact that something which is at your disposal is lawful doesn't really mean it's necessary. Yeah, I think that's right away to put her ideology about life. Do things because they're necessary. My late father's connections got me a lucrative job at an onshore drilling oil firm, and my position is quite inviolable, thanks to my late father's influence at the time. My lifestyle at work was the same at home. Simple. Everyone loved me for it. At least they claimed they did. It was there that I met Jason Smith. Jason was the staff of the firm where I worked, though he was not a full-time worker. He was contracted on a quarterly basis as an offshore driller, and this actually gave him huge money. Though lesser in comparison to what I earned, Jason wasn't intimidated by the fact that I was earning higher than him. Maybe it was because I didn't carry myself about the whole place like I was a goddess who was meant to be worshipped. He was man enough to make the first move and even ask me out. Well, I couldn't say no. I had a successful career already, and I was of marriageable age, so why waste any further time? Plus Jason, he was hot, and the fact that he summoned the courage to approach me said a lot. That was the kind of man that I wanted. Jason and I have been going out for a while now, and he's currently insisting that I meet with his mother. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're having a great day. So this story has 5 updates. The first update we're going to look at, it's a month after the original post, and here it is. Hey guys, I have quite the story to tell you. Jason's insistence that I met with his mom was becoming too much, and though I felt uneasy about it, I knew it was a pointer that he wanted me to take serious. What a guy. I settled within myself that if I was going to see his mother, then I had to be sure that this was the guy I was willing to spend the rest of my life with. It took me 2 weeks to decide, and that's when I agreed that I would meet with his mother. Jason's mother, Miss Smith, was a widow who was a known drama queen. Now, she was a rich person and pompous, or should I say, she was riding on the money which her son was making, but they were never like that. As a matter of fact, she was saying that they had somewhat of a poverty history. From the story which Jason told me, things have not always been rosy for them. They only had a breakthrough when Jason started working for various oil firms as a consultant, and his mother, who used to be humble and accommodating of all suddenlies, became pompous and proud to the point that she was difficult to please. Once the money started coming in, she began developing tastes for high things, and even went as far as disassociating herself from people whom she felt were not her class. After listening to her tales, I was scared to meet with her because I was not going to be the first lady who her only child was bringing home to introduce as his future wife. Jason told me about 3 ladies whom his mother had compelled him to break off from because they didn't pass her scrutiny. They were either too broke or too below par for their son. All the same, Jason told me that he was sure she would love me just as every other person did, and he was not willing to let me go no matter what she says, as I was the exact kind of woman that he's always wanted to marry. I finally met with her last weekend, and I spent the weekend there, despite the fact that I had to resume work on Monday. It was actually her traditions to have Jason's prospective wives spend the weekend at her place, so, I don't know, she could assess them properly. I'd never felt so uneasy like I did the first time I met her. She had her head buried into her phone and barely responded to the greetings of Jason and I. I just stood there for a while like an idiot, till she finally took her eyes from off her gadget, took a look at me from head to toe, and commented that I was not polished enough. Her response sounded insulting, and I would not have taken it if it was coming from someone else, but Jason had already told me how difficult his mother could be, and all I needed to do was just try my best to ignore her and all would be well. She finally offered me a seat and began bombarding me with questions. I was in the process of answering her questions as regards where I worked when she cut me off. She'd only heard that part that I worked in the firm where her son was an offshore driller, and her response showed she thought her son was of a higher rank in the firm, and I was simply going after him for his money. She looked at me intently and asked if I would have dated her son if he was not making the money which he made. It was obvious she never knew that her son was nowhere close to me financially. I almost laughed, and I wasn't willing to let her know. I wanted to see her attitude towards me, as she felt her son was probably doing me a favor by dating, and wanting to get married to me. I simply told her that I loved her son, and his wealth would not grow or kill my love for him. If only she knew that the digits in my several bank accounts read more. She finally asked what plans I had for her son, and I simply told her that I planned on adding value to his life as much as I could. The sarcasticness on her face showed me she was not convinced. That was all. She dismissed me for the night, and the next 2 days I spent in the house was something else. I did my best, starting from the very next morning, to prove to Mrs. Smith that I would be a good wife who would take care of her son. But the reaction which I got was unexpected. I practically learned why people, and even her so-called son, said she was a difficult woman. I'd asked the only maid in the house that morning to focus on cleaning the other parts of the house while I dealt with the kitchen and equally prepared breakfast. But I was midway into it when soon-to-be mother-in-law bumped into me at the kitchen. Her shouting was enough to bring both Jason and the maid running straight down to the kitchen. We all watched in amazement as she began telling me about how wrong it was for me to be in the kitchen preparing dishes or cleaning any part of the house, as there was actually a maid who had been employed to do this. I found it really absurd that she was making a big deal out of the whole thing, but I kept my opinion to myself, of course. This was something I did at home, despite my ability to hire help. And if I should get married to Jason, I would obviously be doing the same thing. Well, the weekend finally came to an end, and I was never so glad in all my life. It was equally surprising, too, that she did not ask Jason to break up with me. Update number 2, 4 months later. Hey guys, I know it's been 4 months since my last post, and I'm writing from where I'm currently observing my honeymoon with Jason. Yeah, I'm now married to Jason, though it was not a smooth ride, let me tell you about it. Thanks to his drama queen of a mother. After I've spent the weekend at Jason's place and it was clear that his mother did not oppose our union, I decided to take him home to see my mother, as it was the right thing to do. Unlike his mother, Jason was not compelled to spend any nights at our place. My mother did not put him through a rigorous process of scrutiny to verify if he would make a good husband. She only asked if he loved me enough and wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. Somewhere along those lines of family discussion, my mother discovered that Jason was the son of Mrs. Smith. She'd actually heard about Jason's mother, and after Jason left, she advised me to properly think it through if I wanted to get into a family where the drama queen was going to be the mother-in-law. I told her that I had thought it through, and I was sure I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Jason. Besides, when we got married, we were going to be living alone, so there would be little or no drama coming from his mom. My mother saw reason and decided to let me go on with my plan. Jason and I began preparing for marriage, and I'd informed my mother that we planned on having something really quiet and small. Not for the lack of money, as either my mother, Jason, or I could fully cover the cost of the wedding, but we did not want to attract attention to ourselves. Mrs. Smith soon invited me over to her place, and I couldn't really tell why, till I got there. She first of all expressed her displeasure at the fact that I and Jason had not carried her along with our wedding plans, and after I apologized for like 15 minutes, she finally asked what our plans for the wedding ceremony was going to be. I was told that there was not much preparation going on, as we planned on getting a very quiet wedding ceremony. Jason's mom was quiet for a while, then she picked up her phone and began to dial a number. I was confused, as I did not understand what was going on. It turned out that she was actually calling Jason, and when he finally picked up, she began asking Jason why all the ladies which filled the earth, he decided to get married to one that would bring shame to the family name, and probably kill her before her time. I was shocked and glued to my seat, as I did not know how my actions were so far intended to kill the mother of my fiancé. She ordered him to come straight to the house, and he did in no time. Jason got to his mother's and he was even more confused than I was, because he knew very well that I would never do anything to hurt his mom. He didn't even need to question. His mother began going hard on him for letting me talk him into having a quiet wedding. Quote, "We're the Smiths, and we don't do things small. We have to let people know that we still have it in us. Your wedding has to be class." That's what she blurted out when Jason tried making her understand that we only wanted something quiet because we did not want to attract unnecessary attention. She simply insisted that mingling with the simple had actually made him start thinking small. What Jason's mom failed to understand was the fact that I could throw the most elegant wedding she's ever seen in her life with the dignitaries, way above her class present. She was talking of a class, but she had no idea that she was nowhere close to either my mom or I's. Jason's mom began insisting we let her plan the wedding. It was a serious issue, as she was not going to let any wedding which she did not superhead its planning take place. After much consideration, we had to let her have her way. The funny thing was that it was the wedding costs were going to come home from her son's pockets, as she was probably living off the money which he made anyways. My mom heard about this whole drama that's taken place, and she was mad about the fact that we let Jason's mom dictate what our wedding day was going to look like. She had to warn that we stood up to her sooner or later, otherwise we were likely not going to have peace in our own home, as someone outside would be the one directing the affairs of everything. The wedding day finally came, and I must give it to Jason's mom. She did do a splendid job with the planning, though it was clear that a lot of money had been thrown inside.
Well, I can't say I never expected it to be, so when I knew who it was that was planning it, it was our wedding as well as her show. She'd invited her guests, whom were equally rich folk from rich homes. My mother kept to her desires to invite just her family members and a few friends. Everything went well that day, except for the fact that my mother-in-law clashed with my own mom on my wedding day. It was really embarrassing, and of course, you could tell who started the fight. Jason's mom, who is now my mother-in-law, had stopped my mother and her family members from seating at a place where she claimed was reserved for some of her honored guests, which were yet even there. This was just her looking down on my mother and I because she mistook our humility and simplicity for poverty and wretchedness. To start with, my mother and her people were meant to be counted as part of the most honored people at the party. These were the family of the bride, for crying out loud. My mother knew it was not really going to be nice to have a ruckus with her in-laws on the day of her daughter's wedding, and so she saved me the embarrassment and left the wedding with her family members and friends. I don't need to be told that level of resentment which my mother has for her in-law has since doubled. What's up, guys? Mr. Reddito here. So it definitely seems like things are starting to heat up in this mother-in-law battle. Update 3 is coming up next, and it's been 90 days. Exactly 3 months since the last update, and things are about to get a little twisted. Here it is. It's been 3 months since I've last posted, and my honeymoon had since ended. It was one of the most peaceful and pleasant times of my life, but I sadly had to return to the reality that I had a drama queen for a mother-in-law who was ever ready to trouble me. Right after Jason and I returned from our honeymoon, we both went to pay his mother a visit, and she did not receive us warmly. It was almost like she was not happy seeing us together. We had to pacify her for a long while before she finally said the cause of her problem. It was my mother. Mrs. Smith complained that my mother had embarrassed her before her wedding guest, and neither my mother nor I was yet to apologize for making her almost lose her temper in public. I did my best to hide the feeling of disgust which was all over me. Was this woman serious or what? This woman had gone beyond the bounds of a drama queen. She was now a certified crybaby. How could she expect an apology from either my mother or I? If anyone was to render an apology, then it was supposed to be her. She'd almost ruined my wedding day, and if not for the maturity exhibited by my mother, it was certain that the whole party would have ended in chaos. Well, I'd just gotten married to her son, so I had to entertain her excess for now, so I got on my knees and I begged for an apology for whatever my mother has done. She was pacified by my appeal. Her ego had been massaged, something she wanted all the time. 2 weeks after I've returned from my honeymoon, I got a promotion, and it meant more salary plus the brand new Mercedes-Benz, the very latest one, which cost a pretty penny. Normally, I would not be driving around in such an expensive car, as I consider it a waste spending so much money on a vehicle. But this was a private car that was fully paid for by the oil firm where I worked, so I had no other option than to enjoy what was gifted to me as a result of my hard work. Things were cool till Jason's mom called on one day and demanded for $20,000 besides the monthly stipend of $10,000, which he never failed to give her. It was difficult for Jason to meet the demand, as we've just gotten married, bought our house, and needed to recover financially from the expenses which we've all recently made. Jason was about calling her to explain the situation on ground, when I gave him money to give to her. But I asked that he did not tell her it came from me, ever. I believe that a wife should do her best to protect the face of her husband in the public eye, and besides, my money's his money. So it would be wrong to stand by and watch him bear all the financial burdens alone without having the willingness to help. Jason had given his mom the $50,000 which she asked for, but it was not up to a week before she came demanding more. This time, she was asking for $100,000. Now, I get the fact that when her son was single, he could have easily met her demands, but he's a married man now, and has other responsibilities and priorities besides footing the bills for her extravagant lifestyle. Jason asked to know what she needed such an amount of money for, and she claimed that it was for a fundraising party which a friend of hers was organizing and she had been invited to. She just wanted to keep showing off with her son's money, of course. Jason had to explain to her, we just bought a house and we're trying to settle in, and so he could only afford to pay for her monthly stipend from now on. Until things were stable, at least. But she wasn't willing to listen. My mother-in-law soon calls me and asks that I speak with her son as touching of the demands which she's made. But I repeated the same thing which he said. It was at that point that she became angry with me. She began calling me a gold digger who only wanted to divert her son's wealth to myself. I just laughed on the inside because her son wasn't even on my level financially, and I didn't need to divert anything, as I had more than enough of my own. I remained silent and listened to her hurl curses at me. When she was done, she cut the call in anger, and she was not getting any form of response from my end. She decided to call my mother and ask her to take me away from her son. My mother was not willing to condone her nonsense. She simply cut the call on her in-law. Jason and I were currently contemplating what to do. There's a lot of financial responsibility, and we can't afford to please his mother this time around. What would you do if your in-law put you in such a difficult position? Alright everybody, Mr. Reddito here, so there's still 2 final updates. At this point, I'm starting to wonder, why are they even contemplating giving this mother anything? She seems so toxic and vile. I would cut her off. But anyways, this next update came out 2 months since update 3, and it says this. It's been 2 months since I've last updated, and all I can say now is that it's official. My mother-in-law now resents me. Jason's mom kept breathing fire after she could not get the $50,000 out of us, and we all just did was ignore. So Jason still sent her the monthly stipend of $10,000, which he did. Jason's family recently had their annual get-together party where the whole of the extended family met to see kind of a bond. Well, in essence, it was a show of a party made to make people see how successful you were doing in life. And over the years, Jason's mom had been the one stealing the show. Jason knew that his mom was definitely going to make demands, and so he just decided to give her half of what she asked for right away. A grateful woman would have been content and all, but she wasn't. She was obviously thinking that I was eating her son's money, and that's the reason why he could no longer give her that the way she wanted. I suspected that she had used the monthly stipend given to her to make up for the money that she needed to show off just for one night. To be honest, I never wanted to attend the party as it was not my kind of thing. But Jason insisted that we went as it was going to be an avenue for the rest of his family members who had not seen me to meet them. The day finally came and we attended the party. Everyone was already present, and they were asking Mrs. Smith about Jason and his new bride when our Mercedes just pulled up into the compound. It was obvious that, with the way everyone looked enviously at the car, it was the best so far in the meeting. While they were wondering who it was that's made such amount of money to afford such a car, Jason and I popped out. I was looking classy, yet not too pronounced. I could tell that Jason's mom had never really seen me dressed the way I did that day. Jason took me around to greet his people, and they could only stare. I even heard some of them openly tell Jason that he had caught a big fish. Jason and I went to greet his mother, but she snubbed us and walked away. It was embarrassing, but we decided to ignore her at the party. While everything else was going on, she could not help but look at me in anger, and I was seriously scared. I told Jason of how uncomfortable I was with his mom giving me the killer look, but he claimed that she was just acting up and nothing serious would come of it. Well, he was wrong. I soon felt the need to use the ladies' restroom, and his mom followed me. She accosted me on the way going back to rejoin the party, and she started telling me how ungrateful I was. She was just being really bitter. I didn't want to pick a fight with my mother-in-law, as it would be wrong to do so. So I politely excused myself and moved past her. She could not hold her anger anymore as she followed me into the party and gave me 2 dirty slaps. Well, her action caught everyone's attention, and Jason began running towards where we were. His mom began throwing insults at me, and in the midst of everyone claimed that I was a gold digger who was diverting her son's wealth, and that's the reason he could no longer take care of her. She began demanding right there in the midst of everyone that I left her son alone, as I was not his type and never would be. Well, as you can imagine, the embarrassment was massive, and Jason, for the very first time, had to stand up to his mother the way she never expected. In the midst of everybody, Jason told her that she was ungrateful for claiming he had not been taking care of her when he constantly sent her a monthly stipend of $10,000, something most parents present there did not get from their children on a monthly basis. He told her that this woman, who she called a gold digger, was a senior partner in a firm owned by one of their cousins. And that was beside the fact that I worked in the lucrative oil company where he equally worked and have actually been earning a higher salary, twice as much as he's ever seen. As a matter of fact, he drew to her attention. That Mercedes, which everyone's drooling over, was not my car. It's hers. Jason practically made her understand that what individuals were actually saying was true. He had actually caught a big fish, me. I confirmed all her sons and told her to be true. I equally told her about some investments which we had not even mentioned. This was to let her know it was wrong to look down on folks because they chose to live a simple life. The look of surprise and shame that covered his mother's face was absolutely epic. She just looked at me surprised as Jason went ahead to inform her that the woman she claimed was not too polished for her son was way out of his league. And, well, hers too. She only appeared simple because she was not raised to vaunt herself in pride. Mrs. Smith was embarrassed. Her actions have backfired, and even her son stood up against her in the presence of everybody. She left the party in shame, and Jason and I could not remain there after the outburst. Update number 5, 2 months later. I last updated, and things have gotten quite interesting, right? Right after the family party that ended on a sad note for myself, Jason, and his mother, everyone stayed on their own. His mother, who was upset that my financial status was hid from her all along, decided to not reach out to us as she was expecting us to come and beg her as usual. Well, it got the shock of her life when we did not even call to check up on her. Jason had decided to cut off from her to the point of not even sending her the monthly stipends, which he did. I've never seen him so offended. I kind of liked the fact that he stood up for me against his mother, just like every reasonable husband should. And though I wanted pleading with him to reach out to his mom, I didn't do so because we had to draw the line at some point. Otherwise, she would keep on going about with the childish entitlement mentality which she had. When it dawned on her that she had fully abandoned, she began calling to reach out to us, but Jason refused granting her access. If she knew where we stayed, I can bet my life on the fact that she would have come to beg us at our own residence. But her pride and ego had prevented her from paying us a visit ever since we got wedded. She had to reach out to someone who she had resented in the past, and who equally resented her. My mother. My mother was reluctant to speak with her over the phone, but after listening to her tone, which was beginning to sound humble, my mother gave her listening ears. She asked my mother for direction to where she stayed, and my mother gave it to her. It's funny when you look at it because Jason's mom had refused paying my mother a visit when her son was seeking my hand in marriage. She'd actually insisted that my mother was the one who was to come to her house, as she could not imagine herself stooping so low to visit someone of my mother's class. Now, she was pleading, begging for the address. She finally paid my mother a visit and first of all apologized for her actions in the past before pleading with her to help reach out to me and Jason. My mother had to pay Jason and I a surprise visit because Jason was not willing to hear anything that concerned his mother over the phone. My mother pleaded with us to forgive Jason's mom, as she was still family to us no matter what we said. I had no issues forgiving her, but it did take a while before Jason could be pacified. After my mother had mediated for Jason's mom, she was invited to her house and her jaws dropped, open, at the kind of edifice where we lived. She pleaded for forgiveness and promised to straighten up for good. Well, it's been a week since we all made up, and we've not heard any trouble from that drama queen. I believe she's finally changing for good. We're planning on hosting another family get-together party by the next week, just to make up for the previous one that ended up a disaster. We want to show everyone that we're now one big happy family. And of course the party would be elegant. One which not even Jason's mom has ever experienced. To cap it off, I do have a surprise for everyone on that day. I would be breaking the news. of my pregnancy to everybody.
I don't know. The thing that bothered me the most about this story was that Jason just would not stand up to his mother for the longest time. It took the very end of this story just for him to stand up. Guys, let me know what you thought about this story. Drop your opinions down below. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.